24 deadbeat fathers, penniless drug addicts, and hapless bastards out of their misery. Emergency crews at the scene of the merciful accident described the sea of fast food bags, candy bar wrappers, and losing lottery tickets surrounding the crash site as utterly tragic, adding that the scorched corpses inside the bus were, quote, only slightly more lifeless than before the deadly accident.
Evidence suggests that most of the victims suffered during the crash, and for many years before they even boarded the bus. All I can say is, thank God no one made it.
Al-Qaeda is refusing to carry out any further terrorist attacks until the U.S. mass transportation infrastructure is drastically improved, calling the country's roads and bridges a, quote, travesty, unbecoming of a developed first world nation.
We want to turn your bridges into rubble. But if we took credit for making them collapse, no one would ever believe us.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are here on day 2 of the Porcupine Freedom Festival. This means, of course, that you would not be hearing this on day 2 of the Porcupine Freedom Festival. You probably won't actually hear this until Thursday night, which would be day 4 of said festival. That is, of course, because tonight we're running a different show, and tomorrow night we're running Ernie Hancock's Declare Your Independence.
Oh, well, Thursday is Ernie. And Wednesday will probably be this show.
You're right, yes.
Yeah, it was all up in the air for a while, so...
I keep making that same mistake. Even though the automation system has it correctly in my head, it's still the other way around. So yes, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
So that's good. I mean, so you'll be hearing this only a day behind, which isn't terribly late at all. But it is the second day, and it's shaping up to be a fantastic festival. We were all, not all, but many of us yesterday were a bit concerned by how low population the event seemed to be. And I couldn't...
Really, I didn't... Well, the thing is, I'm not used to PorcFest like you guys, so it seemed normal to me.
It's supposed to... People kept saying that it seemed normal for a first day of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, but there were a few of us who were like, no, this is a lower turnout than
I bet
normal.
I know what it is, and I didn't get to finish this yesterday, but Alu isn't here, and he talks enough for 40 people.
At least 40 people. He also talks quickly enough
yeah.
to...
convey the words of 40 people in a minute. Well, I think it's really messed up that the Free State Project asked him not to attend things until his trial is over. I mean, they didn't ask Ian not to attend things until his trial was over because they assumed he was not guilty. They didn't presume he was guilty, which is the correct stance. So they shouldn't do it to Alu either. It's crazy. Whether Carla will say, like, oh, I just asked him. Well, I saw the text. It was definitely a... if he decided to just come anyway, there would be a problem kind of text. It wasn't just, please, let's if you'll agree, then you won't come to Forkfest. No. It's ridiculous.
I understand where they're coming from on this. I don't know that I don't necessarily have a position on it. I just sort of see both sides. Like, on the one hand, if you have someone accused of sexual assault, they probably should not be here. I feel like that's a fair thing. But at the same time, people are presumed innocent until they're proven guilty.
I mean, like, so someone could say you guys were accused of fraud, and that's just as bad because there's vendors here.
I suppose so, but there's no allegation that we're going to defraud any vendors, I guess, where the allegation was that what Alu allegedly did happen here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
Yeah, I guess that'd be the only difference. I still just think it's so wrong.
Yeah, I think he should have been allowed to come here if that was what he wanted. And, you know, if it had been me, I would have opted not to go if I was in his place. But, you know, I certainly feel like the Free State Project has been a bit heavy-handed in recent years.
Heavy-handed in one direction, too. Like, they didn't ask Kelly Potenza, who brought charges against him, not to come. Like, if it has to do with the government.
Yeah, and that's a bit shady themselves, too. And, I mean, basically, like, if you don't feel safe, you shouldn't come to the Porcupine Freedom Festival, right?
And why is Mikey banned for 2 years?
Because he didn't respect the ban last year. He didn't respect their authority.
Yeah.
And therefore, he must be banned again this year. And this year, he is respecting their authority.
Well, there is a plan that might go down against his will that will get him in.
Okay. Well, he had mentioned that he had a conversation with one of the organizers and that he apologized and he thought he had smoothed things over. And I was like, well, that's fantastic. I'm happy to hear it. I hope you're able to stay. He had told me that he was regretful that he had gone down to the pavilion last year for Soapbox Idol.
Yeah.
And that created a bit of an issue because Constance was one of the judges last year, and she was the person who was organizing the Porcupine Freedom Festival. And she was not very happy that that no one seemed to mind the fact that this person who was banned was up there. And she used her microphone as one of the judges to vent about this sort of thing. And like, that's not what we're trying to do here at the Soapbox Idol,
It's
right?
supposed to be the people who go up, right?
Yeah,
Not the judges.
Yeah, we're not supposed to argue with the people's positions that they take.
If you wanted, could you be a judge and also do a soapbox rant? Or
I
no?
imagine so, but I mean, you couldn't win, obviously. But like, if I wanted to do a rant, I'm sure they would let me.
Yeah, you should do that just for maybe not theatrics, but what am I trying to say? Just like, I don't know, to do it.
They are fun, and I do love ranting. And this year, of course, I am again a judge at the Soapbox Idol competition. That seems to be just one of my yearly things now, and that's great. I love that event. It is by far my favorite event here because it just gets a bunch of libertarians to get on the stage, and for 3 minutes, they just rant about things. But I want to caution you, we judges don't take this thing seriously at all. If you come up there expecting like serious critique and feedback, and if you try to, good God, if you take our scores seriously, you're going to have a bad time. I've literally watched Jeremy Kaufman tell someone, "Hey, I will give you a bonus point if you bring me a beer." Like we're openly corrupt in what we do, right? The point. As he would say repeatedly, the game is made up and the points don't matter. That's, of course, a reference to whose line is it anyway. And that's true because we do write down points and we score these things. But at the end, we just look at them and we go, I think I want that guy to win. And, like, that's literally what we do. And, like, at least one person got, and still has not apologized to me, got pretty hostile with me over the internet about my critiques of what she had said during the rant competition. And
Took it way too seriously.
yeah, and when you watch the video, I actually didn't say anything bad at all.
Yeah, I watched the video just to see what it was about since I wasn't there live, and I thought, wow, that was like as mild as it could be and like a normal judge response. It wasn't even like you playing jokes or whatever.
No,
like
I was
you might have-
completely neutral.
Yeah.
Because the third judge, that's usually what they do. Like the first judge gets to be the funny one, the second judge can be the harsh one, and then the third person speaking has to just sort of trot a middle path because we don't want them to end on a bad note and go, oh man, these judges are jerks, right?
Where do you find the video? I didn't know it was online anywhere.
They're on the Free State Project YouTube page, I believe.
I think they'll put it in a playlist where you can go to like their soapbox playlist and find it listed by the person's name who ranted.
Awesome.
So we are joined, of course, that voice you heard, that was Tony Olson.
Hello.
And you manage the Freedom Haven project, is that right? And
Yep.
that is right across the street from us, basically, and it's part of the Silk Road, which, for those who've never been here, Rogers Campground has a lot of roads, and you're supposed to walk all the way up one if you want to get to the other side.
Even walkers have to do that?
Yes.
What
Yep.
Technically. I mean, otherwise you're cutting through someone's campsite.
Oh, no, I see what you're saying. But you can walk up or down the road, right?
Yes.
Okay, I got
Yes, sorry.
a little confused there. I was like, what? The cars can
and
only
the Silk
go
Road is
down.
everyone who says, please come walk on our site. We want you to walk on our site. It's brilliant.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, most people here aren't going to get terribly upset if you cut through their site anyway, because you probably know most of them. Like if I want to go see Sean over at Chuck Wagon Soda, or whatever he's calling himself now, I'm just going to cut through these sites here because I know all these people. And they're not going to care at all that I cut through their sites. So tell us about the Freedom Haven project, because you are right there. Like, you put your site literally on the Silk Road. Like,
Yep.
it's right beside one of your picnic tables. So what is it that you guys do there other than giving away free pancakes?
And the free pancakes is, of course, to get everyone to come to the site so we can actually find those who are interested in finding out more about the project. We don't pitch the project to people eating the pancakes, but people eating the pancakes ask us questions about the project, and then we can tell more about it. The project itself is to bring the free market to the high seas. There has been, in the past, years ago, decades ago, contention between different countries over who has what jurisdiction on the seas.
Right.
United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea kind of settled that, but it also established that 200 nautical miles from shore, most of the time, is where their jurisdiction ends. There are some caveats on it. You have to have a flag of convenience, and that loops you into certain laws. But you could end up with about 99% of the socioeconomic freedom you're seeking, which is pretty good now. And if we're recognized as a nation in the future, then we could actually offer 100% of the socioeconomic freedom you're seeking.
How many people are doing this right now?
There are individuals on their own little boats doing this all the time.
Okay.
They go outside there and they spend a couple of months, but they're just burning through their food and fuel until they have to come back to shore again. They're not actually producing wealth. They're actually just living on their wealth. Our goal is to have a population at least the size of PorcFest, where you can have a thriving local population, thriving local marketplace, and also be a port city, so the ships come to us. We never go to shore. We're always outside the exclusive economic zone. And when it's time to switch ships because our ship finally dies, then we'll just switch to a new ship. And everything's modular, so you can just plop it over.
You mentioned people consuming their resources, and I can see why that would be a problem, right? Like you would have to have some sort of contact with the mainland, because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not much arable farmland out in the open sea.
Yeah, there is tons of it on floating barges, but it's so expensive that it's cheaper to ship corn all the way from Iowa halfway around the world to us. Just like you get cheap bananas at the store, global shipping is coming incredibly cheap.
I had no idea that people grow food in the middle of the ocean on barges.
It's not very cost effective. It's not very economical.
But it's
fish
independent.
farms.
Is that the reason they do it?
Yes.
Wow. Well, if you don't want to switch your boat every time it goes bad, you could be like the ship of Theseus and replace it one board at a time.
The ship of Theseus. Yes.
Theseus, yeah. I had to Google the name.
So how is the project going? Because I feel like we've talked to you about the Freedom Haven project and various seasteading projects over the years. Has there been any momentum in recent? Because the last I remember, and this was like before I went to prison, so my memory's a little fuzzy, but someone... a seasteader had gotten near some Southeast Asian country.
Yep.
Thailand.
Is that what it was?
Chad and Nadia off the shore of Thailand, and they made the mistake of I'm friends with them, and I love them to pieces, but they made the mistake of looking at where does that freedom start. They used the word international waters, but the international law never mentioned international waters, which means depending on who you're talking to, it means different things. So they were beyond the 12 nautical miles of shore, but they're still within the exclusive economic zone, which means they're still part of Thailand. What Thailand did to them in seizing their vessel and accusing them of treason was terrible, but technically illegal. Yeah. So they weren't far enough. And they were also just one vessel, so they're just like another yacht out there. They're not really producing wealth. They're just burning through their substantial wealth.
Well, that's unfortunate, but that happens a lot, where the government does a thing that is evil and awful and despicable, but technically they've given themselves the authority to do it.
Yep.
And warrants come to mind, because when I got raided on March the 16th, they asked me if I wanted to see the warrant, and my response was, what's the point? You guys kicked in my door and pointed guns at me. What difference does it make if you have a sheet of paper that your own team authorizes you to have?
You know why I wanted to see the warrant is because the guy I asked about it didn't know why he was raiding my house. He was like, it has something to do with Bitcoin. We'll show you the warrant. I was like, you're agreeing to do this and you don't even know why? So it's not even like that they don't even have the opportunity to be moral if they don't know why they're raiding your house.
Well, there's nothing moral about the warrants, right? Because it's a one-side consent contract.
But they don't have the opportunity to say, like, oh, well, we had pretty good proof this guy murdered somebody, so I feel good about raiding his house. If you don't even ask, if you're just like, oh, raid this guy's house, sure. You know?
True.
Crazy.
Well, obviously, the people must be guilty, otherwise they wouldn't be accused, is what a lot of people think of, and that's terrible.
There are people in federal prison, who say stuff like that. Like people who have been victimized by the system. Like there was this one old dude, this Romanian gypsy named Adrian, who he said exactly, he was like, well, I knew I must have done something illegal because the FBI was interrogating me.
Whoa.
Did you hear the crazy crap that just came out of your mouth, dude? You're exactly why juries always vote guilty.
Yeah.
Stop thinking that way.
I noticed that the visitors at the jail were way more likely to be that way than the visitors at Ian's current prison. The visitors at the prison say things like, yep, you know, Uncle Sam always wins, but he didn't do anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I like the visitors at the prison way more because of that.
There are two differences on the high seas that give an advantage for freedom. One is that like at the federal level, they've lost track of even the number of laws that even exist. There's tens of thousands of laws. They can't even tell you the number of pages. They do have it all bound in various volumes, but it's just an estimate of how many even pages or laws, whatever there are. But on the high seas, if you're going like the flag of Liberia, there are certain international laws that they've tied themselves to, and their maritime laws that affect the crew and the ship, but not the passengers. There's only about 10 laws that affect the passengers. So you actually have like 99% of your freedoms you're looking for out there. There's still that 1% of stupid stuff that you still have required to do, that they're requiring you to do. But once we are recognized as our own country, we can get rid of all that as well. And if a country comes after you, it's different than just quietly taking you away in the middle of the night in their own country.
Right.
It's an international incident, especially with like Starlink and all the other things. We're going to be on the air 24/7. This will be public. This will be visible. Everyone will know exactly what will happen.
Streaming?
We'll stream everything every day, every hour.
That's, man, I hear like things about Starlink all the time that just make me think, wow, what a good thing. Like, we covered this story where it was like the title and the angle of the article was trying to make it look like a bad thing that internet came to this tribe in the Amazon. It was like, now they're addicted to porn and stuff like that. But it was because Starlink came around that these people first got access to the internet, and they were like kind of addicted in a way because, wow, I went from knowing this amount of things to everything all at once. And like, it's not like every single one got addicted to porn, but like it's a good thing.
They
not a bad thing.
Starlink is awesome. I love Starlink. I have Starlink at home.
It's brought internet to so many places where it never has been.
Yep.
Like the high seas.
I like the visionary nature of seasteading. I'm not sold on it, but I like the visionary nature because I'm looking longer term, and I suspect that we won't really be able to achieve one of these societies until we're out there like colonizing a moon or a planet or something. I realize that's centuries upon centuries off, and seasteading is something we can do now.
Yeah.
But I suspect the same sort of pioneering desire for liberty will motivate people in the future to say, you know what, that moon kind of sucks. No one's going to want it. Just like no one wants to, not no one, but very few people would choose to live in the open sea all the time.
Do you go out of your way to learn about like animals in the sea? Like, do you know what would if a like whale would attack or a giant squid? I really don't know if like I've never looked into it, you know. So I would be always afraid that giant squid was going to come attack.
I've not heard anything like that.
Yeah.
I
suspect it's very rare.
There are actually thousands of people that would want to live there today, and we found those people. The problem is here, as much as freedom as we've lost, we haven't lost enough freedom to make us be willing to become political refugees ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not willing to leave our country for it. But other people in the world, millions of people in the world already have done that. And they'd be willing to, they may not understand freedom, they may not understand why freedom works, but if we tell them, here are your rules, you mean that murder, kidnap and steal, and here's what it means, and if you do that, you're getting kicked out. And that's it. That's it. Those are all the laws. And that they may understand why, they may not even believe the philosophy of it, but if they abide by it, you have yourself a free market.
Exactly.
So those people are lining up. The only thing that's missing is basically just investors who want to say, okay, we have this cheap labor force, we just need to provide them with cheap housing in these areas. They have an increase of their standard of living, and you have your cheap labor, and you can export the things that free markets do better, like medical industry.
What kind of stuff could you manufacture on a ship?
Medical stuff is usually the biggest one. That and data centers, anything you want the federal government not to be controlling and taking.
Okay. So Bitcoin exchanges would be good there.
Yeah, actually, exchanges would be very big there. Any kind of exchange. Because
not that I condone that sort of thing. Just an observation.
I am being legal in everything, but I look forward to the day where that won't matter anymore.
So you mentioned investors and that being the main problem. It sounds like a monumentally expensive project. Are we talking like trillions or upper billions? What are we talking
The estimate
here?
for about 3 years ago, and inflation is constantly going to change this estimate, unfortunately, was about $260 million for 4 cabins and the maintenance for the course of 10 years. And that includes the ship, which is about $160 million, which is a lot, but it comes down to about $65,000 per cabin for 10 years. So basically, I could go out and live out there. It doesn't include food or water or electricity. A free market would provide that with competing prices. But I could go out there and live there for 10 years for $65,000, or basically $6,500 a month. if I paid the whole thing in advance.
Okay,
Oh,
so
wow.
you're sort of trying to crowdsource it, I guess, by getting
Yep.
people with the money to sign up and pledge, similar to the Free State Project.
Yes, and perhaps that's the wrong approach. Maybe the approach I need to take is finding businesses who want to open up businesses there, and then the workers would come with that, because it has been very difficult to crowdsource, find enough people who would be willing to actually do this on an individual basis. We have maybe 100 people. We
Yeah.
need 4,000. So
Yeah,
that's,
it's a big ask.
It is.
Because you mentioned that we haven't lost enough liberties in the United States, and that's true, but we have lost a lot of liberties. But I think the bigger concern is that it's so comfortable
Yeah.
Yes.
to live here. And it's not comfortable being a pioneer.
Like, I think about even if I went to another country that had the same amount of laws as the United States, but it didn't have, like, Walmarts everywhere and, like, just all the stuff that America has, I don't think I would go.
you would, though. Here, you would have all those things. I mean, I live in Keokuk, Iowa. Okay, that's a landlocked state, but I didn't always live there. But we have, with 10,000 people, we have a super Walmart. We have big grocery stores. We have Aldi. We have all those things, infrastructure. 10,000 people is enough to justify all that, which means out there, we would have the same thing.
To me, it's not necessarily about the shops as much as the fact that, like, interacting with the same 4,000 people every day over the next 10 years is kind of a bleak prospect.
But that's temporary, because as soon as we're out there and it shows that this works, this is a seed. And once this has been there for even just a year, you're going to have other ships showing up.
Possibly.
Our ship will also...
I mean,
that's
you
true.
can't guarantee that.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And we can't get more than 100 signers at the moment. It seems unlikely people are going to go, hey, that actually works. That's all we needed to know.
I think that right now, it being such just a thought, and then if it was like something that people could point to, look, it's actually happening, people are actually living it, that might garner more attention. Like,
and that doesn't necessarily mean they are all Americans. I imagine that the first generation might be mostly other people and businessmen who want to invest in the profitability of a free market.
Sure.
But I should also point out that Mark Edge's Freedom Kingdom in Honduras is a thing happening right now.
Is that
And
still happening?
It's happening, and it's not like it's gotten a whole bunch of attention. And I think it's the same problem Arya has, because my problem when I think of Mark's is I like just now, before I came to the place where we have our setup here at the campground, I went to a town called Littleton, like 30 minutes away and back. I basically live for stuff like that, like just like, oh, and look at the mountains over there. Like I can't imagine living on an island. Like I feel like I would go crazy so fast.
It would probably be more like living in a big city like New York City, where you go out, you look out the window, you see the next building. You don't see the beautiful mountains in the background, but you do see other things. The ocean is full of beauty under the ocean that people live for.
Oh, it would be
There's
cool.
no corals
No
out there
doubt.
right now, but there's going to be corals growing around that area, and fish come to
Wow.
wherever these things are positioned.
You could have diving, and even like people might build things where you can just go into it and you look around at the
Yep.
sea. That would definitely be cool.
And no doubt about it. Between land and the ocean, I definitely prefer for land. I mean, it's cheaper, it's easier, but
Right.
my freedom is worth that much to me.
Yeah.
So tell me where people can go to learn about this. You guys got a website, I assume?
Freedomhaven.org. FREEDOMHAVEN.org.
And you are right over here. What is your site number for people who are listening to the show tomorrow night and want to stop by on Thursday or Friday?
Our RV 3035, and we have 5 different presentations we're doing throughout the
All right,
Oh, at
fantastic.
the pavilion?
none of them at the pavilion.
Oh, at your site.
I don't know. I just say once at our site, tour at the Fire Steel.
So come down to RB35 and hang out with them. There's more coming up here from the Porcupine Freedom.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country.
Yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing. To be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Ben Chihaya. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official on Wednesday during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. He was welcomed with a lavish ceremony and spent hours speaking one-to-one with Mr. Kim. The deal marks the strongest connection between the two states since the end of the Cold War. It covers security, trade, investment, cultural and humanitarian ties. Those relations have tightened in recent years, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which the US and South Korea claim is being fueled by North Korean ammunition in exchange for food and military aid, accusations Moscow and Pyongyang deny. Both neighbouring nations face Western sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war, which require that civilians be protected. Israel's rejected the UN findings as factually and legally flawed. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah amid deadly skirmishes in past months. The Israeli military's drawn up a battle plan, while Hezbollah published drone footage captured over Israeli military sites. Sarah Coates is on the ground for us in Israel.
This video purportedly showing very sensitive naval bases and things like Iron Dome batteries published yesterday by Hezbollah will certainly be of great concern to the Israeli military, given that no air defenses were activated, although it remains unclear when this video was shot. They're sophisticated, heavily armed and battle-hardened from fighting in Syria's civil war. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to turn Beirut into another Gaza amid urgent calls from the international community for immediate de-escalation in a bid to avert a wider regional conflict.
Hezbollah insists it will not halt its attacks into northern Israel unless there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Filipino soldiers say they had to use their bare hands to fight off armed Chinese Coast Guard personnel in a clash earlier this week in the disputed South China Sea, following a string of dangerous maritime encounters. China alleges its actions were restrained, but Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder has expressed concern.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it could lead to something bigger and more violent.
An American soldier has been jailed for almost 4 years by a Russian court on charges of theft. He'll serve a sentence in a penal colony. Nick Harper reports.
34-year-old Staff Sergeant Gordon Black was arrested last month following reports that he'd threatened to kill his girlfriend and stolen just over $100 from her. Black's travel to Russia was not authorized by the US Department of Defense.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, day 3 of the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and it is an absolute scorching here today. A beautiful day to go swimming. The sun is brutal, though. I'm not going to lie to you. Bring some water, bring lots of water. Stay hydrated. Don't die out there. It's been my intention to buy a case of water and put it back here on the table so people can come by and just take one instead of dying. But libertarians tend to be on the more intelligent side of things, generally speaking. So I expect it won't be a problem for people to stay hydrated. But I'm sitting down now with the vice presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Arya, it's Mike Tremont. Thanks very much for having me join you today. I know I just sprung myself on you as we're walking down the path here. It's not quite a scorcher. I'm going to say it's 1 degree shy of scorching so far. Okay. I think it's going to be scorching in about an hour. And, my buddy Tim, who's here with me from Virginia, we were looking for a bottle of water, and we bumped into you first, so it's a great pleasure to be with you.
It's a great pleasure to have you on, and of course, don't apologize for stopping through and getting on the show. I mean, that's what we're here for, really, is to interview people who are out there doing things, who are engaging in activism or engaging with libertarians and doing what they can to make the world a freer place. That's critically important to us here on Free Talk Live. So thank you for joining us today. How do you feel about how the presidential campaign and vice presidential campaigns are going? Because I spent the last 11 months in federal prison for selling Bitcoin. Yeah. So I just got out about 3 weeks ago, really. And I did not follow politics or news at all while I was in custody. And when I got out, there was immediately the Libertarian Party National Convention, which I don't know how people attend those.
It's worse than a prison sentence.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It's a lot of arguing about Robert's Rules of Order, I imagine.
Yep.
Because libertarians are very pedantic and very argumentative.
Yep.
And a Libertarian Party National Convention is designed to sort of incubate all of those characteristics. But they do achieve things. And among those things was electing a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Well, thank you very much. I am excited about the ticket. Chase Oliver is a great young man, longtime successful peace activist, important member of his community, and he and I are on the same page about so many public policy issues. And it's a joy to create a team with him. I think between the two of us, we represent the full spectrum of what's going on inside the Libertarian Party. By the way, and we should probably explore this 11 months of yours. I'm sorry you had to go through that, especially I think we all agree that we need more freedom surrounding financial transactions, especially surrounding how it is that we treat competitive currency. So I think the whole thing is awfully silly, and I'm sorry to hear about that. But as a political matter, you probably missed the best 11 months that you could miss. A grand total of nothing political has happened. We have made no progress in terms of controlling the amount of money that our government spends, either at the state level or the federal level. We have made no progress. Arguably, we've gone backwards in terms of controlling our monetary policy and stopping the Federal Reserve System from issuing money willy-nilly. We have made no progress in terms of foreign policy. Arguably, again, we've gone backward, especially in the Middle East, apparently backing up Israel come hell or high water while waving our arms over our head and complaining, but continuing to give them money. So that's a weird combination.
I did see some of that while I was in prison, because there were a few inmates who just made it inexplicably clear, not directly, but it was clear when you watched them and you listened to them, that to them, it was the equivalent of WWE. Watching the war was entertainment for them. And that was a horrifying thing. And they're like, Arya, how come you're not interested? And I was like, because you're not interested in it. You're just being entertained. And people are dying out there. It's not entertaining, man.
I think you
tragic.
put your finger on something really important that we really don't spend much time talking about. And that is that I think that politicians use it not to entertain themselves so much, although quite possibly, but in terms of entertaining, in some sense, their constituents. They're giving their constituents something that their constituents like to watch and participate in from a distance. You know, it's something that Americans feel like they can afford to get wrong. Foreign policy, foreign aid, for example, I believe is an ethical problem. I just don't think it's an ethical proposition to take money from Americans and send it abroad. But it apparently is not enough money to make people pissed off, as I believe that they should be. And so a lot of Americans just tolerate it and watch it, to your point, almost for entertainment.
Well, I think they don't notice it or get upset about it because it's so subtle, right? Inflation is what is paying for most of the foreign aid and the wars, and it's so subtle in how it hits Americans. They're angry about grocery prices and everything else, but they don't make the connection that this is because of the foreign aid, the wars, the drug war, and all of these other overblown projects that the United States government is financing through inflation.
That is well put, and that's why we're here. That's why the Libertarian Party is here, is to make Americans make those connections. Hey, the reason prices are going through the roof and that your wages are not able to keep up is because of the foreign wars. It is because your government is spending too much money, and not just on defense, but through a silly array of entitlement programs and a silly array of discretionary programs. And these are programs that are being led and adjusted as time goes on in order to spend more money. These decisions being made by people who have a completely different set of values than yours and really don't care about your values.
No, but they get to rule over me for reasons that aren't quite clear to me. I mean, I understand what people would say, but the reasons don't actually make any sense when you start diving into them. I'm very happy to see. I want to get back to the Libertarian Party, your national campaign, if you don't mind. I'm sure you don't mind talking about it. I'm very pleased to see, especially because of the sort of conservative infiltration that I've seen in the Libertarian Party over the last 10 or 15 years, to see a presidential candidate who is some form of LGBT. I don't know. I know what people say on Twitter, but Twitter is a cesspool that everyone should, or X, whatever you want to call it, just delete your account. Be done with it. It's a nightmarish hellscape of libertarians arguing with other libertarians, and that's all it is. Just close it, be done with it, and carry on with your life. Go outside, touch grass, as you like to say.
I agree with you, and I think it's particularly interesting because Chase and I have so much in common with the way that we see the world, so much in common in terms of our public policy positions, what it is that we're trying to achieve, what it is that we're trying to keep the government from doing. And yet, sure, our lifestyles are quite different. You know, he's 39 now, a very young man. I'm 62. I've been a police officer. I spend a lot of time talking about police reform. He's been a peace activist. I've been a professional economist. He has run for Senate in a race that a lot of your listeners will remember was that in which a runoff was forced between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker in Georgia when each of them got 49% of the vote and he got 2% and forced a runoff, pissing off the entire state of Georgia, which I thought was absolutely terrific.
I did something similar in Keene a few years ago. I believe it was 2022 when I ran for mayor. And the way Keene is set up, they don't usually have a primary unless they have 3 or more candidates. And I happened to be the 3rd candidate, which forced the city to spend an estimated $16,000 to have this primary, in which I was almost immediate. I mean, I was knocked out decisively, but it was like, it's insane that one person can achieve that degree of disruption to the system.
And for you, that's what it's all about. And if they're going to continue to not use a more sophisticated form of voting, they're going to get themselves into these situations. And so I think that you help them, hopefully, rethink how they're going to conduct their voting in the future. And it reminds people that we're here. It reminds people that you have another option besides Republicans and Democrats. And if people look into it, I think that they'll realize that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party no longer represent your values, that the Libertarian Party really does represent your values.
So you mentioned that you're a former cop. Now, obviously, this is not overly popular among libertarian circles. I've heard two main takes on you. And one is that, oh, no, he's a former cop. Don't trust him. And the other is, well, yeah, he's a former cop, but who else is better for police reform than a former police officer? Do you have anything to say? Would you like to address any of that?
Well, look, if there are a lot more important reasons not to trust someone besides the fact that they did something in particular for a living. I had a terrific experience as a police officer. I would encourage anyone out there who can hear my voice, who believes in community service, who believes in public service and a career in which you learn a lot about public policy, I would encourage you to consider it. I was fortunate to find an agency that had a separate vice unit, that had a separate traffic unit, so I didn't have to get involved with the stuff that I personally consider stupid, right? I didn't have to get involved with the war on drugs. I didn't have to get involved with writing traffic tickets to help the city meet its revenue goals with quotas. I didn't have to get involved with like prostitution stings and asset forfeitures. A lot of the stuff that I personally consider stupid, I was able to avoid. That doesn't mean that I was able to stop my city from doing it, right?
Right.
But at least my personal experience was much more rewarding and to me personally much more valuable. And as you might imagine, you do get into a lot of discussions. And I'm happy to report that most of the guys that I worked with, most of them were guys, but guys and gals that I worked with, registered Republicans typically, not registered Libertarians, absolutely have a libertarian streak. They recognize that the war on drugs doesn't work as a practical matter. A lot of cops have an ethical problem with the war on drugs, as we do.
Well, their kids smoke weed.
Their kids smoke
with
weed,
very
of course.
high likelihood.
And a lot of cops used to smoke weed, right? So it's not like they don't get it.
Right.
I mean, please, I grew up in the 70s,
Sure.
There's only certain things I can and cannot say on a disclosure form without lying, right? So I don't think that police officers are a group that has their head in the sand. I think one of the things you find out as a cop is that a lot of public policy is dopey. It's just silly. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. However you feel about it ethically. As an empirical matter, as an objective matter, you learn that a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense. And, we libertarians, we love to rail against the government, right?
Right.
Well, consider everybody loves to rail against their boss. If you're a cop, your boss is the government. So we're always talking about, oh my goodness, did you see the stupid thing the mayor did the other day, the stupid thing the county did, the stupid thing the governor did? You're talking about that all the time. So I'm happy to report that the cops that I worked with, at least, mostly registered Republicans, absolutely libertarian with a lowercase L.
That's good to hear, and I'm not surprised to hear that most cops, hate their boss being the government, because when I was in BOP custody throughout most of the last year, that was what we heard from staff members all the time. Like, if you had to deal with the nurse, she's a BOP employee, and she would just complain about BOP policy to you the entire time, as would the counselors, as would the unit managers. They all just hated the policy, but they all enforced it.
Right, right, which is really unfortunate. And, like I say, I was able to avoid that sort of thing, but I totally get it, and a lot of people, for me, I joined the police department when I was 49.
Okay.
I worked as a cop from age 49 to 60 for 11 years, which is, say, until just a couple of years ago.
So you were recently a cop, like 2 years ago? Okay.
Yeah, second career. I was a professional economist for 25 years before that.
That's an interesting career transition.
I suppose so. But my point is that my eyes were a little bit more wide open. I kind of knew a little bit more about what I was getting myself into. I think a lot of youngsters get into it not quite realizing how dopey some of these policies are. And then you find yourself enforcing things, if you get involved with a vice unit or something like that. It's only after you've done it for a lot of young people that you realize how stupid it is.
You also raised a really good point that people who actually want police accountability or who want to change how policing works, realistically, I have to say, I think the best way of going about achieving that goal is to become a police officer. Like, if you're a libertarian out there, become a cop. Yeah, you'll probably get fired, but go ahead and do it and see what happens. Don't enforce the drug war. Don't enforce laws against victimless crimes, and just see what happens.
Well, and the bad news is that you probably won't get fired. It's very hard to get fired as a police officer in most places, even if you piss off your boss as often as I did. Look, we did have some tough discussions. I was a training officer for several years. I loved doing it. I loved working with the young people, especially because I was able to, in many cases, convince them to conduct police work the way that I saw made sense. And for me, the difference between good police work and bad police work comes down to a respect for the Constitution. And I think it's that case for most cops who realize what good police work and bad police work is all about. So I agree with you, and I was eventually fired as a training officer because, at some point they just, can't stand the fact that you have a different attitude about certain things. That happens. But, no big deal. And, to your point, what's the alternative? You're going to let people do all the police work who don't have a libertarian attitude, who don't respect the Constitution? That's probably not a good idea, right?
No, that sounds like a terrible idea, because we know they are going to hire cops, right? Like that's a given. They're always going to find some bodies to put in there to become cops. So why not just go ahead and do it? And that was sort of my mentality when I ran for sheriff back in 2020. As on a platform of F the police.
Yeah.
It was tremendously successful, all things considered.
I love that. That's funny.
I actually ended up getting 25% of the vote or thereabouts in Cheshire County, so it was amazingly successful. And it got a lot of conversation started because I wanted the sheriff, especially here in the New England areas, they have sort of a historical view on sheriffs where they exist outside of the police apparatus, and they are the supreme law enforcer in that county. So my idea was become sheriff, hire some libertarian deputies, and go out there and police the police.
Absolutely. I think that is the right attitude. I spend so much time talking about police reform because I think that the object of the game is to force police officers and police agencies, I guess more succinctly put, to become better aligned with the underlying values and principles, mores, culture of the underlying community.
Yeah.
Right? That's the object of the game. We are not saying you shouldn't have a criminal code. People in their communities have a right to come together and decide to have a criminal code, how they want that to be written and how they want that to be enforced. I get that. But you can't have a situation, which we do have in far too many cases around the United States. You should not be tolerating a situation in which the police agency itself is making decisions about how to enforce that.
Yeah.
You need political control over that. I believe that your mayor or your commission or whoever your appointed leadership is needs to be representing you as a member of the community, enforcing that agency to behave the way that you find best, that aligns with your values. And I appreciate your F the police slogan there, because it does start conversations. I like to go to the next step and say police reform is hard. It's hard work. And it's going to take police officers and agencies to come along for the ride. This is a cultural change. And any cultural change takes time. That's just the unfortunate truth of the matter. But police officers in the long run will find, most police officers are not former economists, but most police officers will find that reform is good for them. They want to make more money for working hard, less money for officers that don't work hard or don't work well, and the crappy ones got to get fired.
I want to come back to your campaign for a moment, because I've given some consideration to trying to run for something for the National Libertarian Party. It's just sort of in the back of my head, right? But if ever there was a year where I would not want to be the one doing it, it would be this year. And this is primarily because of Donald Trump's promise to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Now, I imagine, I haven't heard either of you say this, but I imagine you would pardon the guy, which obviously is better for him. It's going a step further, as well as Julian Assange and all of the others, most of whom Donald Trump didn't say anything about. But he did promise to commute Ross Ulbricht's sentence, and as a result of that, a lot of libertarians instantly swore their votes to Donald Trump. And that's going to hurt in the national election. So I don't envy you for being the person who has to fight this particular battle. But how does it make you feel as a candidate? I mean, do you have anything to say to these state libertarian parties who are denouncing you and Chase Oliver? Like, guys, you went to the convention. This is how the convention worked. These are your candidates. Denouncing them, you are no better than Nick Sarwark here in Manchester, who divided the state Libertarian Party because he wasn't happy with the candidate, and now he's been completely ostracized. He's not here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. He used to be the chair of the National Libertarian Party, and we want nothing to do with him.
Well, that's a good point. I do think that we need to stick together, and let's be honest, Chase got more votes than anybody else. Now, I was in there trying to get more votes than anybody else too, right? I was running against Chase.
Right.
And, in the back of my mind, do I sort of wish I had gotten more votes than everybody else? Sure. That would have been great. But, sometimes things don't go your way and your favorite guy or your favorite gal doesn't win. Does that mean you just pick up your ball and go home and say that the party is full of crap and it's worthless? No, of course not. I think it's time for us to mature a little bit in terms of our long-run outlook on what's good for the party, the role that this party can play in terms of advancing the movement, what the movement can do in terms of advancing freedom and liberty for Americans around the United States. And I think part of that is remembering why we do this and for whom. We do this for people that are not here at PorcFest, that aren't me, that aren't Chase, that aren't Ariel, that aren't anybody we even know. We do this for people around the United States who are not represented, who probably don't know how to spell libertarianism, who have no idea Libertarian Party exists, but deserve representation. People that are among those that the government takes most advantage of, that need someone to stand up to the state on their behalf.
So I have another possibly difficult question for you, possibly really easy question for you. New Hampshire is very big right now on secession. Of course, we're the home of the Free State Project. We've had at least 2 bills in the in the New Hampshire House of Representatives that were pro-secession, including one that would put the question on the state ballot, allowing the people of New Hampshire themselves to decide whether to secede. If New Hampshire were to be successful in these efforts, how would President Oliver and you as vice president respond to New Hampshire saying, hey guys, we're ending our relationship, we're divorcing, we're still friends, but we don't feel like this relationship is working out for us?
We would wish you well, and we will meet you in the church basement for Thursday night potluck. Okay? That is the correct attitude. I view secession as a good idea whose time has not yet come. I would like to argue that you have the right to secede. I don't think it's the best choice today.
Okay.
I reserve the right to agree that it's the best choice at some point in the future. I don't think we're there yet. What I would suggest is give Chase and me a chance to turn this ship around a little bit, and subsequent libertarian tickets to turn this ship around a little bit. Maybe even out there somewhere behind some tree is a libertarian-minded Democrat or Republican. I haven't seen them, but I want to remain open to that possibility as much as I doubt it. Give us a chance to turn that ship around a little bit before we go all the way to secession. You have the right to it. I'm not suggesting that you don't. I'm just suggesting I don't think it's going to solve all of our problems.
I like that answer, and thank you for that. You guys are already doing better than Jo Jorgensen, who ran 4 years ago, and who, when we asked her the same question, she said, well, if we were talking about Washington or California or something, I wouldn't mind. But if it's New Hampshire, I don't know, guys. I don't know that I'd be okay with that, or something to that effect. We're like, what do you mean you wouldn't be okay with that? Like, that was the moment she lost our support, because at the time, Ian and I were the ones interviewing her, and we were more or less spearheading the CACR 32, which was that constitutional amendment to allow the state of New Hampshire to secede.
Right.
So I'm very glad to hear.
Well, if you don't live in New Hampshire, I don't think you get to say whether you're okay. I mean, why do I care whether you're okay with it?
Well,
right?
She was the Libertarian Party presidential candidate at the time.
I get it.
So we were asking her, what would President Jo Jorgensen do?
Right.
If
if I were
seceded?
Vice President of the United States and Chase Oliver President of the United States, I guess I might be grumpy about it. I mean, I might have my feelings hurt, right? That someone would want to break up with us, but I wouldn't say that I don't get it, right? I mean, I've been dumped before. Most of us have, right? And I can remember being grumpy, but I don't remember ever thinking, you don't have the right to dump me. Like, that would be weird, wouldn't it?
It would be. So we've got about a minute left. If you'd like to send a message out to the people listening to the show to entice them to support you and Chase Oliver, especially in this time of great division and chaos within the Libertarian Party.
Well, I think there's less chaos than you might think. And as we present ourselves to the rest of the world, there's no chaos at all. I think that everyone should go to votechaseoliver.com. You can go to MikeTremont.com, by the way. The website is still up. I'm not dead.
Can you spell Tremont for me?
No, it's very hard. Look, if you get the Mike part right, you're halfway there. But the last name has 2 A's in it. So it's MikeTermaat.com. And easier to spell. This is what I do. I go to goldnewdeal.org. That's the name of our platform, goldnewdeal.org. And you can link back to MikeTremont.com. If you're out there and you want to get involved with the campaign, you can do so through either one of the websites. You can also throw in a few bucks. Some people like to throw in money. Some people are offended by money. If you're one of those people who's offended by money and has $100 that's pissing you off, send it to the campaign.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us. It was a pleasure to have you on. Again, that's Vote Chase.
If you're looking for work, you know what I mean by elevator speech. It's the short version, saying just enough to make the listener want to listen more. Even if you're not a job seeker, effective communication skills have never been more important, with money and attention so scarce now. So to cut through the clutter, choose every single word as though it was the last word the person you're speaking to will hear. Otherwise, it might be. Instead of saying, due to the fact that, say, because. And avoid mispronunciations. Say jewelry, not jewelry, which could offend. Undoubtedly, you don't want to say undoubtedly. And whatever you do, never use a preposition to end a sentence with. Just kidding. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
Eleutheromania, the insatiable desire for freedom. It's the new 3-song heavy metal EP from Captain Kickass. Available now on your favorite music app or get it directly from CaptainKickass.com.
There are lots of ways to listen to Free Talk Live. Our podcast has been around since podcasts began, and now the FTL feed is loaded with content besides our full show archives. Did you know that we make it easy for you to customize your podcast subscriptions? We have different feeds, one that includes only our full shows, one with just the Daily Digest, and our main feed that includes everything. You decide what you listen to. It's quick and easy to customize your feeds at feeds.freetalklive.com. That's feeds.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the latest episode of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Ben Chihaya. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official on Wednesday during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. He was welcomed with a lavish ceremony and spent hours speaking one-to-one with Mr. Kim. The deal marks the strongest connection between the two states since the end of the Cold War. It covers security, trade, investment, cultural and humanitarian ties. Those relations have tightened in recent years, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which the US and South Korea claim is being fueled by North Korean ammunition in exchange for food and military aid, accusations Moscow and Pyongyang deny. Both neighbouring nations face Western sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war, which require that civilians be protected. Israel's rejected the UN findings as factually and legally flawed. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah amid deadly skirmishes in past months. The Israeli military's drawn up a battle plan, while Hezbollah published drone footage captured over Israeli military sites. Sarah Coates is on the ground for us in Israel.
This video purportedly showing very sensitive naval bases and things like Iron Dome batteries published yesterday by Hezbollah will certainly be of great concern to the Israeli military, given that no air defences were activated, although it remains unclear when this video was shot. They're sophisticated, heavily armed and battle-hardened from fighting in Syria's civil war. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to turn Beirut into another Gaza amid urgent calls from the international community for immediate de-escalation in a bid to avert a wider regional conflict.
Hezbollah insists it will not halt its attacks into northern Israel unless there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Filipino soldiers say they had to use their bare hands to fight off armed Chinese Coast Guard personnel in a clash earlier this week in the disputed South China Sea, following a string of dangerous maritime encounters. China alleges its actions were restrained, but Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder has expressed concern.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it could lead to something bigger and more violent.
An American soldier has been jailed for almost 4 years by a Russian court on charges of theft. He'll serve a sentence in a penal colony. Nick Harper reports.
34-year-old Staff Sergeant Gordon Black was arrested last month following reports that he'd threatened to kill his girlfriend and stolen just over $100 from her. Black's travel to Russia was not authorized by the US Department of Defense.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at new research suggesting that Parkinson's disease can be detected up to 7 years before the onset of symptoms. It's the finding of new research conducted by British and German researchers. Professor Ray Chowdhury is the director of the Parkinson's Foundation at King's College Hospital in London.
This is quite an exciting development where Parkinson's, which is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disorder in the world and is predicted to double its number in the next 10 to 20 years, potentially could be diagnosed by a set of blood tests. And the investigators are suggesting that this diagnosis could even be made even before the person becomes symptomatic. In other words, when the person actually goes to the doctor and says there might be something wrong with me, might be a tremor or slowness or stiffness or whatever, it can predict that development 7 years before it actually happens.
But he says the research raises an ethical question. There is currently no neuroprotective treatment available to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease before symptoms begin. So if the research is correct, people may face the prospect of learning that they could soon have Parkinson's without currently being able to do anything therapeutically to prevent its onset.
Our top stories again. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
If you're the parent of a man-child, you know how frustrating it can sometimes be. The piercing sound of his video games waking you up at 2 a.m. His insatiable hunger and inability to cook anything for himself. The messes he makes. The stress can be overwhelming.
Something will set them off, such as their man-child will tell them that they don't know how to tie a tie even though they're almost 30. They'll start shaking them and yelling and saying, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you get a real job instead of working part-time at a board game store?"
The results of shaken man-child syndrome are devastating. Trauma caused by the brain colliding with the inside of the man-child's skull can lead to cognitive disabilities, making it even more unlikely he'll finally marry the girl he's been having a long-distance online relationship with for 6 years. Or it can even lead to death.
He's not spilling cereal all over the couch or leaving his beard clippings in the bathroom sink intentionally. He truly does not know what he's doing.
For the Lab Report, I'm Stuart Adams.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We are here on site, pre-recorded for those who aren't aware. You are not listening to a live broadcast right now. We are on site, so we're also not taking phone calls. I may or may not give out the phone number because it's like less at this point.
I just hit it. Free Talk Live 603. Oh,
right. But we are here on site at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Be warned, if you're arriving today, bring lots of water. Go ahead and stop at a store and buy 2 cases because you're going to need them. It's in the mid-90s today. And it will be in the mid-90s again tomorrow.
It's only 1 degree less than it was yesterday, and I had to quit, go to my motel room, take a shower that wasn't very hot, change my clothes at like 1 or 2 p.m. It was so hot yesterday.
Hold on, it's cooler than it was yesterday. I would have swore it was
1 degree.
Hotter.
That's what I heard. I don't know.
Well, tomorrow it's going to thunderstorm, and if you're expecting any amount of relief from that, sorry, it's still going to be in the mid-90s while thunderstorming, so we're going to have 100% humidity.
Yeah, I was going to say my hair is going to be disgusting.
Yeah, the humidity is already pretty high here because we are in New Hampshire, but tomorrow is going to be significantly worse. I will be somewhat surprised to see a lot of people open tomorrow, especially around this time. I think it's likely they'll just close up shop.
Is it tomorrow till the rest of PorcFest?
No, it's just thunderstorming tomorrow, and I believe after that it cools off. I say that cooling off is relative, down to about the 80s. So it will be much better after Thursday, or at least somewhat better.
I don't know, might have changed since you looked last, unless this is just incorrect. It says tomorrow 70, cloudy only.
70? Wow.
70 is low. High is 89.
Okay, that's...
but no rain. And then Friday is 55% chance of rain, 75 is the high, and no lightning anymore. But it's changed every time I've looked.
Okay, that's really good news. That happens a lot in New Hampshire, where storms, it's going to be this Wednesday, but it actually arrives on Sunday.
Or it just goes around you. Like all week you think it's there or coming, and then it goes around you. I guess it's because of the mountains.
Yeah. And it does rain here every year, so I do expect some amount of rain, but not enough to disrupt the festival then. It was the thunderstorm, because I have not checked today, and I don't recall even checking yesterday. But it was the thunderstorm that I expected to be the main problem, just by raising the humidity and just making it muggy. It's sticky out here today, and I don't want to give you a full weather report of what it's like to be up in the mountains of New Hampshire in the middle or at the very beginning of summer, because you should come down and hang out with us and check it out. It's really not usually this intense, but it's a great time regardless. We just finished up an interview with the Libertarian Party vice presidential candidate. I was just sitting, I wasn't even set up. I don't remember what exactly I was doing, but he just wandered up and was like, hey, my publicist said that I needed to stop by and talk with you. And there's all sorts of wonderful vendors here. I was a bit worried. I don't know about necessarily worried, but I see our person joining us now every year here. And you were actually the person who pointed out to me that Satanism is a denomination of Christianity, which was something I had never considered before. And last year and the years before that you were here, you were with Goldback, the company. But this year, you're with someone else.
That's right. What we're doing is we're basically raising it up a level. I'm now with Finance Gold, but finance is P-H-I-Nance. Instead of with an F. The idea is we're going to reinvent the whole financial system. So Goldbacks are a really important part of that. I'm really proud of all the work we did to bring a cash solution to the world, but now we're trying to see if we can't build a full financial system.
I like that. So I guess the idea here is to have some sort of blockchain cryptocurrency that is backed by Goldbacks. Is that the goal here?
More or less, right? It's like a stable coin kind of process. But the difference is that every other stable coin that's ever existed, at least so far before us, has always been centralized. You have to trust that central authority in order to use their token, right? They issue it. They control all the documents. It's almost like a CBDC, dare I say, pretty much any stable coin. We're actually creating the world's first decentralized stablecoin and simultaneously the world's first legal tender stablecoin, because we are using the U.S. gold dollar system from the U.S. Mint. So it will be recognized by legal tender internationally.
Does that mean that people will be forced to take it? Like if you're a United States citizen, you have to accept this?
No, actually. That's one of the misunderstandings about what legal tender means.
Okay.
Nobody's forced to anything, pretty much. Like one of the sad examples, I don't love it, is you've got Starbucks coffee. They don't take cash at all. Cash is legal tender, but you pull up to Starbucks, at least in my home state of Utah, and you want to order something, and you hand them a $20 bill. They're like, we don't take that.
What? I hadn't heard that.
I mean, there's a lot of places that don't accept any bills larger than a 20, obviously. So
yeah, they don't take any paper at all, though.
Right. And
what?
As the point of view of an employer, I kind of get it, right? You can't have baristas and employees pocketing $5 here or $2 there. If they're not actually taking in cash. But I don't understand why they would want to pay the processing fees.
Yeah, because then you have them pocketing 1% there, 3% there.
Right. Every one of these credit
cards.
And
it adds up.
Yeah, every one of these companies that accepts credit cards, they have a credit card processor. And they charge 1%, or sometimes it can be lower, but usually it's higher, up to 3 or 5% per transaction. There was something I did recently that I had to pay the 5% transaction fee for it. And I was
5%'s no joke. That adds up fast.
Yeah, and that's crazy. I can send Bitcoin and it not have a 5% transaction fee. And Bitcoin's transaction fees have been awful for years.
Dash is always less than a cent per transaction fee.
As is Bitcoin Cash and Monero and a number of other actually current cryptocurrencies that qualify as money, whereas Bitcoin, because of its transaction fees and just the mentality behind it, no longer counts as money.
Yeah.
However,
so forgive me, I'd love to get into that. What makes something money?
I would say utility primarily.
The word money, I was just like, I don't know if I should agree to that because I don't know the definition off the top of my head or something. But what I mean when I say it colloquially is like something you can use to give someone, and then you pay for your product, like a very small amount. Needs to be possible too, because it's like if you want to buy a cup of coffee that's $5 with Bitcoin right now, and I've paid a $26 fee before on Bitcoin.
I think Ron Paul defined money in one of his books, but I don't remember how he said it. And I think he was borrowing it from the Austrian economist anyway. But there were 3 basic criteria that something had to achieve in order to be considered money. And I don't remember what that criteria is. I do remember, however, that based on that criteria, Bitcoin fails on one of these points.
That's right. And so here's the problem. But you basically hit on it, Arya, exactly right when you said it's its utility, right? And when you were explaining that you want to be able to buy something with it, right? So money is defined by its functions. How does it actually operate? And so one of them is the medium of exchange. That's what you were getting into, is the medium of exchange means that, yeah, I can actually buy something with it. It's useful for doing that. Well, in order to be a good medium of exchange, it also has to be a good measure of value, because you have to know how much something costs, right? If I'm going to say, oh, yeah, I'm happy to sell you this cup of coffee, but I can't define what it's worth, then that's not going to work either, right?
And
so we
Bitcoin
have to
is
use
terrible
as a
for
measurement.
that. Even if Bitcoin wasn't fluctuating, you would tell someone, oh, it's 0.00016 Satoshis, or Bitcoin, rather.
Sure.
And that's not a useful way of communicating information.
I had a friend that was trying to make that a thing for a while, and he's since given up, where it's like anytime you hired him for work, he would be like, I work for 0.000 blah, blah, blah BTC instead of the amount in dollars.
Right.
And it's just like, you basically have to start saying, I work for $50 an hour, but in Bitcoin.
Well, right, and the big problem there is that means that the Bitcoin isn't being the measure of value, which is one of the functions of money. It means that you're using the dollar that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry to say that that's what we all do. But the biggest problem there is the dollar value keeps changing on us. Like, if I were to say, your listeners right now, if I say words like $1,000 or I say $1 million, everybody has an instinctive reaction. We think we know what that means in our brains. The problem is, guess what? We're all wrong. And I can tell you your age, down to the decade at least, by how you measure those things, what you think they're worth, because it changes all the time. So if you've got the Fed who can arbitrarily change what the value is, then is it still the same value? Imagine if we did this with cooking, okay? And you got your grandma's cookie recipe, and it says 5 cups of flour, and you're like, oh, which kind of cups? Are these 1980 cups? Are these 1990 cups? Are these 2000? Well, that's what they're doing with our money. You'd never be able to make cookies.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are really, really good points. I love hearing about it. What you mentioned in regard to people measuring things in dollar is mostly a matter of familiarity. It's the same reason we use inches and feet here. Mm-hmm. Whereas with cryptocurrency, or not cryptocurrency necessarily, because not a lot of them are very stable, but I've noticed the price of goldbacks is relatively stable compared to some of these other currencies.
Right.
It's also going up, whereas a lot of currencies go the other direction.
Yeah.
So if you had held on to goldbacks from, I'm proud to say I was the first known vendor to accept goldbacks as payment for a product. The wine that I was selling was one goldback right over there.
Nice.
I think that was 2019.
Nice. It was 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that was right at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, it was. Ian had brought the goldbacks here, and people just immediately fell in love with them. But they were $3 a piece on average, and I think it was actually like $3.27 or something. But we libertarians here, we round up and we round down to make things simpler.
Some people don't, and it makes other people mad.
But if you had held on to them, now those goldbacks are going for $5 a piece. So they've nearly doubled in value, realistically. I mean, that's not their price online. I think they're like $4.50 or something online.
A little more than that, and that's why we've rounded up to $5 at the event here right now. But it's only a matter of time, right? When it's a deflationary currency in general.
Yeah, I bought a $5 breakfast plate this morning for a goldback.
And it's good to have a stable currency. But I have to tell you, it's even better to have a currency that is increasing in value, because that encourages you to get more of that currency. The U.S. dollar, on the other hand, is constantly decreasing in value, which encourages you to spend that money rather than saving it, because you know for a fact, you can bet on it with certainty, that your dollars will be worth less tomorrow than they are today. Maybe it's only in fractions of a penny, but 10 years from now, those fractions of a penny are going to add up a lot, to the extent that since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the United States dollar, as of 2013, had lost 95% of its value. So what you could buy for $1 in 1913 takes $20 in 2013. So if you had held on to $100,000 from 1913, then that buys you the equivalent of what, $5,000 would buy you today.
Wow. It's just like when I was even like a teenager, like I'm not saying like when I was a child, too young to understand. No, when I was a teenager, $1,000 felt like so much. Like if I had $1,000 to go to the mall, that'd be like so much. And now if I have $1,000 to go to the mall and it's like I really need a bunch of stuff, because I don't really go to the mall. But anyways, it seems like it's so obviously a lot less.
Yeah, I had somebody bragging the other day. He's like, I must be getting stronger because I can lift $100 worth of groceries with one hand now.
That's
right? Because after all, it's just less and less. So here's the thing that I at finance.gold we're trying to do. We're trying to do all of these functions at once. So right now you've got measure of value. Most people use the dollar. You've got durability. People want gold or silver for durability because it's stable long term. People also want the medium of exchange because they want to be able to buy stuff not just locally. They want to be able to buy stuff electronically over a distance. Each one of these functions has a currency that does it better than the others. And they all kind of suck at doing all of them at once. And so we're like, okay, so what can we do about this? Goldbacks, they're great for the fact that if you're face-to-face doing a cash transaction, it has durability, right? From year to year, it's not going to lose its purchasing power. Right. The way the dollar is, for example. But is it great for medium of exchange over long distances? No, not really.
Right, you'd have to mail it, and then you run into the issues of you're basically mailing cash at that point. There's a really good chance that it's going to, not a really good chance, but there's a chance that it can get stolen.
And you know, that's happened to us as a company. It's insured, but we've had to be very careful about changing the way we mail things and all kinds of stuff because we have had some of them intercepted, and that's not good when...
Has the government ever stolen any from you?
No, actually, that's one of the things that we're... Okay, so I'm an attorney.
Well, I guess
and we've been very cautious to make sure we don't give them any excuses.
I guess I meant like via UPS because they did steal some that was mailed from you guys to Ian. So I guess they technically have.
Oh, the feds did that? See, because we've had some.
In that case, they stole it from Ian rather than the Goldback company. But Ian and I, we were targets then. So like we. Just that just sort of happened.
Well, and the whole goal, of course, is that we have it insured so that if it doesn't make it through the mail, that is insured, right, at the Goldback company. But yeah, finance.gold, PHINANCE.gold, is our new project to basically bring all of these things together. Bitcoin, crypto is absolutely fabulous because it can be decentralized. Nobody gets to control it. Nobody gets to dictate. Nobody gets to take it away. It's more anonymous than most other things. We want that function in our money, but we also want the function and stability of gold. Well, especially think about it this way: if you've made a lot of money on crypto, as I hope I hope you and many of your listeners have purchased it below its prices today, a lot of crypto. That's great, but then how do you secure it? Right? You want to secure those gains. What we want to do is have right on the same crypto exchange a way for you to turn, maybe 5% of your Bitcoin holdings into gold that you know is real gold, and therefore, it doesn't have the upside of the instability of crypto, but it doesn't have the downside either. It will be very, very stable. So secure a little bit of it. You don't have to do all of it, just 5-10%.
That was sort of the concern I had with Pax Gold and a few other gold-backed cryptocurrencies that allegedly existed, is that you just sort of have to trust the exchanges to actually have the gold that they claim to have. At one point, I owned about 1.5 Pax Gold, which in theory, I could have withdrawn as an actual 1.5 ounces of gold. I never did. Those assets ended up getting seized by your lovely government. However, I sincerely doubt...
Pax G doesn't deliver, I think, less than 5,000 ounces, or it might be 500, but it is a huge pile. It has to be millions of dollars worth of gold before Pax G will deliver you any gold at all.
I'm not surprised to hear that, and I didn't do much research before I looked into it, but then I started discussing it with Ian, and it seemed less and less likely that any of these companies actually had the gold that they claim to have. And this has been a major issue.
How do you verify?
Right, with these gold certificates and things like that have been sold online, is that if you can't have the actual gold in your hand at some point, then you're basically...
what do you know?
Yeah.
So the way we've tried to solve that at Finance Gold is that what we're doing is using a multi-key system on our smart contract, which means you can actually use our system, piggybacked on any ERC-3 20 token. You can basically, anything that's like Ethereum compatible, you can actually run it on various different things. But we have a multi-key system to try to fix this. So there's 3 types of keys. There's more than 3 key holders, but there's 3 types of keys. One is for insurers that will therefore pay an insurance. We're paying into the insurance, and they are going to pay for any losses should anybody not get their physical gold. Then there's also a vaulter key. Those are the people who are actually holding the physical gold in their vaults. We already have contracts with several companies, including one of the central U.S. Mint authorized depositories, and they have their own key as well to verify that it's there, and it has to be audited quarterly. And all of those audits and insurance are all on the blockchain itself. So you can actually anyone with access to that blockchain, if you have your own node, for example, which you can have on your own laptop, you could pull that out and say, I have the token, this is my security key, I didn't get the gold, the insurance should pay. And so that way they keep each other accountable. And then there's also, of course, Finance Gold has its own key in order to make sure that we facilitate the transactions as more of a payment processor instead of a bank. And so everyone has to agree. And then once that's done, it's basically very, very transparent way to make sure that you know exactly that your gold is safe and that you can always get it. And if you don't get it, that it's insured. So, we're dividing up that authority, check and balance, as we usually like to call that.
It.
And that makes it so that hopefully we can all keep each other accountable in a decentralized way. Because it's not just Dylan Gage, for example, which is really close with the U.S. Mint, that can be a vaulter. We've got Defy the Grid. They're a great place to buy your gold and silver. They're also going to be an authorized vaulter. Or the United Precious Metals Association is going to be an authorized vaulter for us. And they're, of course, part of the whole Goldback ecosystem. And so each one of them will have their own insurance, their own vaulting, and anybody can get in on that game. We could do it with JM Bullion. We could do it with Kitco internationally. Any of them can then issue and just use our system, because we aren't trying to be the bank the way PaxG is. We are trying to be the payment processor. So what we're doing is we're creating a tool that anyone can use. Every other stablecoin has been more like a central bank saying, this is what we do. Right. You should trust us. We're awesome. And maybe some of them are more or less awesome. But we're trying to make it a tool that anybody gets to say, okay, here it is. Here's the tool. Run with it. Let's create a decentralized financial system.
Now, I love most of what you said just now. I'm less in love with it being an ERC20 token. That's an Ethereum token, because Ethereum fees are a bit high. Has there been any consideration to also making it a Bitcoin Cash token?
Yes, actually, I'd really like to, but we have to make sure that we can get the full smart contract on top of it. Steve Hernandez, our chief technology officer, is actually really quite an amazing crypto genius. I didn't realize how much I should brag him up until recently, actually. Like, he already knew tons more about crypto than I do, and so I was already impressed with him enough. But then I found out he's actually in charge of cybersecurity for the entire Space Force. So everything that goes through any satellite.
He's a Fed.
He's a Fed. But it also means he definitely knows.
He's a militarist at the very least.
He knows a lot more about how to keep information secure than most people that are out there in the space. And so I was like, okay, so you can keep this secure. And he's like, yeah, nobody's ever going to know. It's a very private token. It's a very secure piece of technology.
It's just the fees that I don't like about Ethereum, and the fact that Ethereum has in the past rolled back their blockchain and created a hard fork in order to undo transactions that people with a lot of money decided they wanted to undo. This has happened at least twice on the Ethereum blockchain, and it makes it really hard for me. Like, I could trust your token completely, but I cannot trust the underlying blockchain that supports that token because they've lied.
Right, and we did do all of our beta testing on Polygon just because the fees were really low and it was quick and it was easy. But we can do it on any smart contract. So I'd love to do it on Bitcoin Cash, but we do have to have a little bit more of a stronger overlay on that in order to have the multi-key system, and that's important for the check and balance there.
I can imagine. So I'm glad to hear that at the very least. And Ethereum fees aren't that bad. And I'm not 100% against Ethereum. I want to be clear. I have a hard time trusting them. So I take everything on Ethereum with a grain of salt, because if some billionaire loses 250 Ethereum or 250,000 Ethereum, I don't know what Ethereum is trading at right now, then he's going to be upset, and the Ethereum blockchain will roll that transaction back in order to benefit him, as they've done a number of at least two other major companies that were using Ethereum at the time. But
right, yeah. I mean, it isn't necessarily great for the ecosystem when somebody loses billions of dollars out of it, but it's not one of those things that we can have anybody doing, because there's a lot of illegitimate uses as well.
Right.
That they could put that kind of thing to. It could be an abuse. Of course, I can tell you all day long that our intentions are good. That doesn't necessarily mean that the long term always works out that way, and so that's why you really have to build in these ways of creating a check and balance so that no one has the power to, no one has the ability to ever abuse the system. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to make sure that it's decentralized. Right now, PaxG, Tether, Kinesis, any of these centralized stablecoins, they can go back and change anything they want anytime because they literally control all the data. Now, I know that this is a little bit of a buzzword, but I'd say it's almost like a CBDC. Pretty much every stablecoin has been more or less a CBDC because they're a central bank of their own. They're not necessarily a government central bank, but they're their own central system.
I hate to
and
interrupt,
it's digital.
but we are running out of time for this segment. So one more time, what was the website that people can go to learn more about this awesome project?
Yep, it's finance.gold. It doesn't have to be .com or .org, just finance.gold, PHINANCE.gold.
Well, thank you so much for being here this year, and thank you for sitting down with us. There's more coming up from the Porcupine Festival.
Free Talk Live.
They believe, I think, that government can be good as long as you just elect the right people, which, of course, is nonsense. Government can never be good because it's an agency of coercive force. It doesn't matter who's running it. It doesn't matter what the goals of the organization are. As long as it's funded through coercion, as long as it's funded through threats of violence, then nothing it can do is ever moral or justified. They understand the system and they want to work inside it to change it. So, therefore, in order to have their hunger strike that they'd planned, which I thought was a great idea, they went to the government, and what they do?
Ask for a permit?
They asked for a permit. They asked for a permit. It was already over at that point, right? Whenever you ask permission from the government, you might as well expect them to say no. No!
You know what? It sounds like government has this non-cooperation thing down to a science.
Yeah, right?
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern at freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Ben Chihaya. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official on Wednesday during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. He was welcomed with a lavish ceremony and spent hours speaking one-to-one with Mr. Kim. The deal marks the strongest connection between the two states since the end of the Cold War. It covers security, trade, investment, cultural and humanitarian ties. Those relations have tightened in recent years, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which the US and South Korea claim is being fueled by North Korean ammunition in exchange for food and military aid, accusations Moscow and Pyongyang deny. Both neighbouring nations face Western sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war, which require that civilians be protected. Israel's rejected the UN findings as factually and legally flawed. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah amid deadly skirmishes in past months. The Israeli military's drawn up a battle plan, while Hezbollah published drone footage captured over Israeli military sites. Sarah Coates is on the ground for us in Israel.
This video purportedly showing very sensitive naval bases and things like Iron Dome batteries published yesterday by Hezbollah will certainly be of great concern to the Israeli military, given that no air defences were activated, although it remains unclear when this video was shot. They're sophisticated, heavily armed and battle-hardened from fighting in Syria's civil war. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to turn Beirut into another Gaza amid urgent calls from the international community for immediate de-escalation in a bid to avert a wider regional conflict.
Hezbollah insists it will not halt its attacks into northern Israel unless there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Filipino soldiers say they had to use their bare hands to fight off armed Chinese Coast Guard personnel in a clash earlier this week in the disputed South China Sea, following a string of dangerous maritime encounters. China alleges its actions were restrained, but Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder has expressed concern.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it could lead to something bigger and more violent.
An American soldier has been jailed for almost 4 years by a Russian court on charges of theft. He'll serve a sentence in a penal colony. Nick Harper reports.
34-year-old Staff Sergeant Gordon Black was arrested last month following reports that he'd threatened to kill his girlfriend and stolen just over $100 from her. Black's travel to Russia was not authorized by the US Department of Defense.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Talk Live, broadcasting from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Well, technically, we're recording at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and you are hearing this while we're on site here at PorcFest 21. It's still unbearably hot, but we might be past the hottest part of the day. There is some actual cloud cover now, which is very refreshing, and a little bit of wind is actually blowing. So the day has gotten a lot better as time has gone on. And of course, that's also true of the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I know Monday I was a bit concerned looking around, seeing so many empty sites, and thinking surely people would have come here on the weekend to do their setups so that they were ready on Monday morning. But very few people did that outside of the ForkFest crowd. However, it seems to be almost as packed now as it has been in previous years. I don't think it's going to reach that level because previous years sold out and had crowds of like 3,000, 3,500. But who knows? It's still early in the week. We're only halfway through it, and there's a lot going on. I'm joined now by Christopher Gronsky. I don't remember what projects you're actually affiliated with. So what sort of activism are you doing these days? Fill me in, because I've been away for 11 months.
Of course.
So I'm a bit out of touch with what's happening. So tell me what's happening.
Well, I'm just doing what I've always done for the last 25, 30 years. I've been since the 90s of helping Americans worldwide eliminate their income tax liability. And,
are you the one preparing tax returns or whatever it was here? Because I see these signs saying, well, I don't remember now exactly what the signs say, but I'm like, here? Really?
No.
Do we? That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no, we don't have any of those liabilities. And income tax law is for federal citizens and resident aliens. And so we've been helping Americans worldwide to establish their state citizenship, which has no income tax liability. Federal citizens are, the State Department defines that by the 14th Amendment. And so people, when they fill out forms and things like that, they answer the question, are you a United States citizen, as a 14th Amendment citizen. That's how the IRS and the State Department, the federal government, defines U.S. citizens by the 14th Amendment. That's a citizen subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So they have an income tax liability, and then there's all kinds of people out there giving you different strategies on how to do less or hide or sneak or whatever it is. They can keep as much money as they can. We just deal with it from a jurisdictional standpoint and don't claim that 14th Amendment citizen. So we do work with the State Department and the we do paperwork with the DMVs of the states and things like that. Anywhere you're asked, are you a United States citizen, we make sure that that record is correct, and we have all that preponderance of the evidence that we keep on file. I've been doing this, helping people for 25 years. We don't have anybody having any problems with IRS and things like that. We have classes online. Most of the time we start this work doing a passport process, because that's the State Department deals with citizenship in the passport process. And so we make that clear. We refuse that 14th Amendment citizen, and then we'll get certified copies of that file from the Secretary of the United States, signed wet ink signature certified copies that you could use in court or use as evidence if you need to. But we've had no issues, because most of the time people are filling out paperwork poorly, and they don't realize how they're filling out paperwork. And I'm not talking about tax forms. I'm talking about any time you're asked, are you a United States citizen? If you don't know what definition of the term United States, you may be agreeing to something you don't want to agree to. And that's very common. So that's the way most of people are. But once you see it and understand it, then you'll just be more careful filling out paperwork, and you'll have evidence to support that claim.
So on the subject of federal taxes, obviously, how familiar are you with what happened to co-founder of the show, Ian Freeman?
I'm very familiar with
who is
that.
currently in federal prison.
Yeah.
Because the IRS agents who testified against him admitted on the stand that, in fact, he may have no tax liability, and that they didn't know what his tax liability was. And then, despite that, he was found guilty of, I believe, 4 counts of tax evasion, which I believe was roped into his restitution, about $30,000 to $5,000 a year, if I recall correctly. Absolutely unjust situation there, where you have the IRS representative saying, well, we don't know his tax liability. It could be nothing. in any, like, what happened to guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? Like, that's plenty of reasonable doubt right there. Like, even the IRS had reasonable doubts that Ian owed them any money. So what could he have done? Obviously, there's a lot that could have been done differently. But what could have been done differently to help him avoid that particular situation?
Well, that's a great question. And most people who have an opinion on this stuff, many of them have never read the indictment. They think it's about cryptocurrency. It's not. There was nothing illegal about cryptocurrency. He was charged with certainly tax evasion was one of those things, as well as money laundering. That's all about taxes and about that subject matter, okay? Now, Ian travels. He has a passport. I don't believe he ever communicated or did his passport process. He did take my class, and I would have loved to have helped him conduct his financial affairs in ways that was outside of that jurisdiction. So, and there's a lot playing into that, because there's one thing of what he's doing, but it's the other people. Those federal citizens have tax liabilities, and they weren't making any kind of a change. So federal citizens have these liabilities and obligations, and of course the federal government pursues those people. But if he wasn't just challenging jurisdiction, that he wasn't in those jurisdictions, that would have been one thing. Remember the Browns trial, Ed and Lane Brown, that was in New Hampshire. They had an IRS issue. The IRS had their passport application on the big screen. I was there, where they were swearing that they were U.S. citizens. That's a 14th Amendment citizen. And they said they didn't know that they could fill out a passport a different way. If Ian had changed his passport, because he signed under penalty of perjury that he was a U.S. federal citizen. And so if he'd have done something different, and let's say he did or didn't have a tax liability, he was still dealing with people who did. And that's the point. And so you can't be helping people hide or change or not disclose financial matters for federal citizens and then also resident aliens. So
well, he certainly wasn't doing that. I mean, at least not knowingly. And that's key to the process.
Again,
right?
that's part of what would come out in court and all that. But he wouldn't have been in federal tax court if he was challenging jurisdiction and only about that. But if you're talking about money, and again, you know, I wasn't at the court case. I don't know what facts and evidence were presented that way, but I read the indictment. But here's the thing about an indictment. Indictment isn't a conviction.
Right.
Everybody, without exception, who's been acquitted on any case had an indictment. So it doesn't mean anything to have an indictment. It just means that they're suspecting something and then the court's going to figure it out. But if he wasn't challenging jurisdiction at the beginning, and only being that he wasn't subject to that jurisdiction with respect to the finances, that might have been one thing. But then again, I don't know what other witnesses, because many times IRS will pressure other people that have these liabilities and then give them a plea bargain and then have them testify against other people. That's, whether it's right or wrong, that many times is showing up too, and that's a problem.
Well, you mentioned indictments, and I want to reiterate to everyone that it is in fact true that an indictment means nothing. There was a federal judge out of the state of New York, or maybe he was a state-level judge, who said that he didn't care about an indictment because a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich. And this is absolutely true. And the reason for this isn't just that the average person believes that if the government is looking into you, if they're investigating you, then you're guilty. It's true that most Americans do think that way. Right. It's part of that mindset that, oh, you want financial privacy? What are you trying to hide? It's part of that same mindset. However, it's also true that these people sitting before this grand jury, there's no judge present. There's no defense attorney present. The defense usually isn't even allowed these things are happening, so they're not allowed to bring in witnesses for themselves. It's just the prosecutors talking at a group of people who don't care. They just want to get this over with and go home. It means nothing to them if they turn an indictment because the prosecutors will tell them, look, it doesn't matter if you think this person is guilty or not. If they're not guilty, then the actual trial will find them not guilty, and they'll be free to go home. So obviously the jury goes, well, there's no penalty to this. The person just has to go through a trial, and if they're not guilty, they'll be found that way. Not knowing, of course, that 98% of these things end in plea deals because prosecutors say, hey, if you don't accept this plea deal, we're going to get more charges because these grand juries will always indict further, and we're going to charge you with more things, which is exactly what they did to Ian and myself. And then we're going to argue that you will officially, like on the books, you will be punished more severely in your sentencing for going to trial than by taking a plea deal. By taking a plea deal, you get 2 levels knocked off your sentencing guidelines, which isn't a whole lot. But by going to trial, you don't get those 2 points off. So you are literally being punished, sentenced more harshly by going to trial. And on average, a sentence is about 3 times harsher for those who go to trial versus those who haven't. And of those 2% of people who don't accept plea deals, something like 75% of them get found guilty anyway. And that's because the jury is the prosecutors are able to pick more or less who they want from the jury. They're able to determine the jury instructions, and they're able to tell the jury whatever narrative they want to tell.
Right.
And a conviction is almost certain. And it's a screwed up, messed up system where your right to a trial, even if you insist on it and you get your right to a trial and you're willing to face the consequences of doing so, they tie your hands behind your back and limit the arguments you can make to defend yourself. Like in Ian's case, he was limited to just the facts of the case, right? And the facts of the case was that he sold Bitcoin. I sold Bitcoin. These were known facts. We talked about this on Free Talk Live here. Like we openly sold Bitcoin. We could not dispute the facts that the prosecutors alleged. And that's what it all came down to. The prosecutors were able to make the argument that selling Bitcoin violated the law, even though they weren't even allowed to mention what law was broken, because the judge had agreed that the statute didn't seem to apply, and the prosecutors had agreed that the statute didn't seem to apply. So instead, if we committed these actions, even though they couldn't cite a law that we had broken, we had to get found guilty. And that's what a trial actually is. And then you get sentenced 3 times more harshly than those people who took a plea deal. It's a mess. And
one of the things that we did was when I was called to jury duty, they ask you if you're a United States citizen, and I couldn't get the court to define the term United States, and so ultimately I was convened to be on a jury and selected for that jury, and they said, do you have any reason why you can't be on this jury? I said, I'm not yet qualified as a juror. I hadn't finished filling out the question. And so he says, well, do you want to be on that on the jury? I said, that's not relevant. I am not yet qualified as a juror. And so he excused me, which he couldn't excuse me because I'm not in a position to be on a jury. And so I went to the clerk and I said, I'm not coming back here for a second time. I need a definition for the term United States. I said, I know the State Department defines U.S. citizen by the 14th Amendment. So they wrote me back, and I have it in writing. They said, we define U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment. So I disqualified myself as a juror. Now, here's the reality of that. I can't be tried in this state by a jury of my peers because those jurors were all 14th Amendment citizens who were standing on trial. They all had tax liabilities. So you have a jury who's already, every one of the jurors file and pay income taxes. How are they going to find somebody, whatever their reasoning, to be in a different status than they are? That's why they many times are, it's a tainted jury. There's no hope of an honest trial. And so that brings me to say that in this state, and in every state, I would say one of the number one freedom education that should be happening all the time, besides creating freedom sheriffs, that is jury instruction. If you can, I'll use the word pollute, but I think it's really like cleanse the jury, that there'd be a freedom-minded juror on every jury, you'd never find them. They would acquit every single time. And that would make a significant change if we had jury instruction. And in this state, they're actually, and of course that's a federal court that Ian was in.
Yeah.
But the courts in New Hampshire are supposed to inform the jury that they had judged the case and the law. So if any jury member feels that the income tax law was unjust, they could acquit for that reason alone. That was their power. But again, when you have ignorant people and they, like you're saying, they just want to get out of there, you're not going to get much justice from an ignorant jury.
You mentioned a couple of things that I want to touch on. One is the jury of peers thing, because everyone just assumes they know what that means. But you got to look at it from my perspective, right? I'm an openly trans Satanist anarchist from Mississippi, now living in New Hampshire. If you can find 12 peers of mine to put me on trial, I will happily do it.
I don't think that's the idea of peers.
But
everybody, see, how you're defining your peer is by the nuances of your.
But those are critical. You should be judged by people who are like to you.
Well, there
right?
are two types of citizens in the United States, and you're swearing when you're being on a jury what kind of citizen you are.
I understand, but my point is those aren't being citizens. I understand, but my point is that it's irrelevant whether they're United States citizens or not.
Not according to the statute and what governs.
I know. I don't care about
government.
that. I'm just making the point that it doesn't matter, right? Because that jury is not my peers. You could get 12 angry homophobic Republicans that throw them on the jury and say they're my peers too, but they're very clearly not. And I think most Americans would say, yeah, those were very definitely not your peers. We all have an instinctive understanding of what it means, but we don't ever stop to think about what it means to be tried by a jury of your peers. And as you rightly point out, the American government just says, well, a U.S. citizen is your peer.
Well, that would be a great thing, because then they're not my peers, because there's more than one type of citizen in the United States. So the 14th Amendment was in 1868. There were United States citizens before there was a statutory citizen. One citizen is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The other one has constitutional protections. That's not the same peer. It's not the same kind of citizen. Okay, so the idea of that's well established, and you can read that. They ask that question for everybody that joins. They don't ask people on the jury, what's your gender and what's your thing, and they're not asking people what their religious belief in or not, or whether they're atheist. That's not what.
Yes,
that's
they do.
Not how they. These
jury questionnaires for Ian's trial did include things like, are you a member or have you ever attended services at the Shire Free Church? They were asking about their religious beliefs. They were asking these sorts of questions.
No, that's how they were selecting the jury, but that's not how they qualify for jury.
Okay.
The questions for qualifying the jury, there's about 10 of them. Where you live, what are you a citizen? Really where you live, are you a citizen? And it's very limited like that. So they're not asking all those personal questions. That's what the attorneys are, so they can select the jury that they would favor and get the results that they want, or not. Because if I was talking to Ian, I would have said, if I knew that he had made the distinction about his citizenship, then I would say you can't stand trial, because I have facts from the court saying it's a 14th Amendment jury, and that would have been well enough to either do a mistrial or at least say I don't have a jury of my peers. And I let my state rep Dan Itza, who's a big 10th Amendment guy, I told him about look, the court had violated my duty to be on a jury. I want to be on a jury. Juries need freedom-minded people to judge the case and the law.
Right.
And so that's work the legislature needs to do. And I'm going to work with Max Abramson for that kind of stuff for that. But I think that would have helped Ian a lot.
So thank you so much for sitting down with us today, Chris. And I want to switch subjects just for a moment to continue talking about this. Well, it's not really switching subjects, I guess, then. But we did have to pause for a few seconds. Anyway, So we're getting back into it. I want to talk about, are you familiar with Jay Noon and what happened when he was called to testify or to be a jury or juror or something? I don't remember exactly what he had to do, but he basically made the arguments that he was not a U.S. citizen, and they ended up requiring him to undergo psychiatric evaluation.
Whoa, I never heard about that.
It was a mess. It may not have been Jay Noon, but I'm 99% sure it was, in fact, Jay Noon. Jay Noon is hardcore. Dude doesn't even have a social security number.
You can thank his dad for that.
Yeah, his dad was also hardcore, right? Like that's an impressive level of being off the grid when it comes to the state.
Many of our clients don't do their children's social security numbers and all. So that's a common thing for the clients that we have. They don't want their children to have social security, and that's an easy thing to not get. It's more challenging to if you're doing a home birth or something like that. If you're in a hospital, many times the hospital is creating a birth record, which is the trouble they had with their kids. Some of it was just because they're dealing with state in some of these capacities. And then when they were, interestingly enough, when they were getting their passport process for their kids, they submitted documents that was like, baby girl, Shallon's last name, baby boy Shallon's last name, kind of thing like that. And we use those birth records because that's the birth records the state came up with respect to that. So
very cool.
So we did that process a little different for them. And again, these kids are minors, so they're not signing off on anything like that. And the Noons don't want to do correct those records in that capacity, and so
Right.
they got passports accordingly.
On
And
the subject of
yeah.
home births, though, I would advise everyone to get in touch with an actual doula or a midwife and engage in a home birth instead.
It's the way that everyone did birthing only like 3 generations ago.
Yeah, the medical industry had, based on things that I've heard from Nikki, who does the show and is in fact a doula, so she assists with births regularly. It's a nightmare, and you don't really know until you've seen the other side how badly doctors are violating your rights and hospitals are violating your rights.
I had always heard about it growing up because my mom has had 7 babies, and she wasn't somebody who ever had a home birth on purpose. She had 1 on accident. But it was just every single time she was like, this happened to me, and it's so bad. They don't care about you in the hospitals, and they treat you so bad. They actually abuse people.
Yeah, and that's not the way that you want to give birth. So definitely engage in a home birth. I'm not saying...
Well, if you're sick or there's an emergency, that's beauty. Go to the emergency room, be sick, and have an emergency.
Right.
But most births don't have that. And if you have a good midwife, you can be very healthy. My daughter, my oldest daughter, she's 32. She was born in a birthing center. And then my son, Michael, who's here at the Pork Fest, he was born at home. And, my wife at the time was just so good. It was just relaxing. They were in control of everything. It was just a beautiful process. That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's
It's
great.
not a sickness.
Right, with people that you trust and people that you know.
It's not an emergency. Like my mom, when she had the baby at home kind of on accident, the ambulance came and they were putting her in the ambulance and like basically forced her to go. But she obliged, but she wasn't letting them like put IVs in her arms and stuff. And they were just like, we have to, like, what's wrong with you? And she was like, I feel fine. Like, why would you treat something that isn't an illness, somebody who doesn't feel bad? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
People are
many
crazy.
times it's about making money because
Yeah.
the more things they do for you, the more they can charge for you.
Imagine yelling
But
at a woman who just gave birth. It's like crazy.
that is crazy, because the truth is, being born and dying is stuff that's supposed to really happen at home with your family. That's really
Yeah.
stuff. And so if you're looking to if you want to look for sick management, I think a hospital is a good place to go for sick management. But if you're looking to get better and well, I don't think the hospital is the place you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, especially with what we saw during COVID-19, where people essentially went to hospitals in order to die.
Right.
And then their family weren't even allowed to visit them. Don't give up that amount of control of your life to the medical industry that is partnered with the state.
I was going to say, they basically are the government at this point. I mean, you might have been able to say they weren't the government like 30 years ago or something, but the hospitals basically are the government. There's not going to be a hospital that takes 0% of dollars from the state.
Right. One of the interesting things that I did learn in prison, one of the useful things that the BOP actually taught me, was I had to take this drug education class, which was really stupid, but it was required. And this was one of the only classes that I actually it was the only class that I actually attended. And we spent most of it watching videos, and they were about how these various pharmaceutical companies had invented painkillers, almost always painkillers, and had just killed massive amounts of people. And doctors had done it, hospitals had done it. OxyContin is the obvious one. The recommended dosage for these people was enough to kill them. It wasn't like doctors were necessarily overprescribing it, although they certainly were. And it wasn't that people were taking it incorrectly, although some of them certainly were.
Just wasn't to their knowledge at the time?
No, it was that, like, they would prescribe you 15 milligrams of it, and you take that dose, and you overdose and die. Just because it's more than a human body is supposed to be able to take. And the same sort of thing happened with these, it wasn't Suboxone, it was the other fentanyl sublingual sprays that this guy named Kapoor made. He killed millions of people. He paid doctors to prescribe this drug of his, some of them $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 here. He did like 4 years in prison, and that was it.
They can't patent aspirin because it's just a thing that occurs naturally. Like, yeah, you can mix aspirin with another thing and patent that mixture, but that's why they just act like it has all these problems. Oh, it will cause you to internally bleed, blah, blah, and they like really don't want people to use aspirin when it's like the best painkiller. It's the most natural. It's so good for you in a multitude of ways.
So, Chris, where can people go to learn more? You got a website?
Yeah, destinationfreedom.org is the website. And so this isn't tax evasion, or it's not tax resistance. We agree with the IRS and who they have obligation to.
So that's destinationfreedom.org.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us today. There's more coming.
Hi, I'm Derek J. To me, an activist's calling is to actively work to advance a cause. The cause for which I work is personal freedom. I believe my life is best when I engage in voluntary interactions and self-government. I reject the idea that anyone else has a higher claim to my life or my body than I do. I see people who call themselves the government as a threat to my personal freedom. I realize you may feel differently, but my relationship with the people who call themselves the government is completely involuntary. If Starbucks used some of its money to drop bombs, I wouldn't shop there. So why would I support the American empire? The empire does not require my consent.
Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree. Watch it for free and order the Director's Cut DVD at victimlesscrimespree.com. That's victimlesscrimespree.com.
How many lawyers does it take to change a light bulb? None. They'd rather keep their clients in the dark. There are too many lawyer jokes to count. However, there are some lawyers with more noble intentions. At the Institute for Justice, we bring the light to our clients. We are a non-profit public interest law firm with clear values and principles. At IJ, we fight for those whose most basic rights are denied by the government. Visit our website today at ij.org.
Imagine someone in your community getting in their car, turning on the radio, and hearing the Liberty Radio Network. You can make that vision a reality with your own micro radio station. Visit broadcast.lrn.fm to learn how you can put our programs on the air in your area. You can have LRN.FM running around the clock, and you can even add in your own local shows. Building a radio station is simple, but programming isn't. That's where LRN.FM comes in. Learn more at broadcast.lrn.fm. That's broadcast.lrn.fm. You're listening to the latest episode of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network, LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Ben Chihaya. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official on Wednesday during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. He was welcomed with a lavish ceremony and spent hours speaking one-to-one with Mr. Kim. The deal marks the strongest connection between the two states since the end of the Cold War. It covers security, trade, investment, cultural and humanitarian ties. Those relations have tightened in recent years, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which the US and South Korea claim is being fueled by North Korean ammunition in exchange for food and military aid, accusations Moscow and Pyongyang deny. Both neighbouring nations face Western sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war, which require that civilians be protected. Israel's rejected the UN findings as factually and legally flawed. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah amid deadly skirmishes in past months. The Israeli military's drawn up a battle plan, while Hezbollah published drone footage captured over Israeli military sites. Sarah Coates is on the ground for us in Israel.
This video purportedly showing very sensitive naval bases and things like Iron Dome batteries published yesterday by Hezbollah will certainly be of great concern to the Israeli military, given that no air defenses were activated, although it remains unclear when this video was shot. They're sophisticated, heavily armed and battle-hardened from fighting in Syria's civil war. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to turn Beirut into another Gaza amid urgent calls from the international community for immediate de-escalation in a bid to avert a wider regional conflict.
Hezbollah insists it will not halt its attacks into northern Israel unless there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Filipino soldiers say they had to use their bare hands to fight off armed Chinese Coast Guard personnel in a clash earlier this week in the disputed South China Sea, following a string of dangerous maritime encounters. China alleges its actions were restrained, but Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder has expressed concern.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it could lead to something bigger and more violent.
An American soldier's been jailed for almost 4 years by a Russian court on charges of theft. He'll serve a sentence in a penal colony. Nick Harper reports.
34-year-old Staff Sergeant Gordon Black was arrested last month following reports that he'd threatened to kill his girlfriend and stolen just over $100 from her. Black's travel to Russia was not authorized by the US Department of Defense.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking today at new research suggesting that Parkinson's disease can be detected up to 7 years before the onset of symptoms. It's the finding of new research conducted by British and German researchers. Professor Ray Chowdhury is the director of the Parkinson's Foundation at King's College Hospital in London.
This is quite an exciting development where Parkinson's, which is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disorder in the world, and is predicted to double its number in the next 10 to 20 years, potentially could be diagnosed by a set of blood tests. And the investigators are suggesting that this diagnosis could even be made even before the person becomes symptomatic. In other words, when the person actually goes to the doctor and says there might be something wrong with me, might be a tremor or slowness or stiffness or whatever, it can predict that development 7 years before it actually happens.
But he says the research raises an ethical question. There is currently no neuroprotective treatment available to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease before symptoms begin. So if the research is correct, people may face the prospect of learning that they could soon have Parkinson's without currently being able to do anything therapeutically to prevent its onset.
Our top stories again. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
A cool guy from middle school is still sporting his fat pair of Jinkos. A stunned St. Peter's Square crowd hears the Pope getting bitched out by God, and an 8th grader caked in makeup is probably really confident. This is The Onion Week in Review. This week, a Pew Research Center poll found that the vast majority of Americans would watch a television show called Love Trap, with most saying that regardless of the show's genre or quality, they would tune in weekly to see its stars stumble into romantic triangles, double-cross one another, and contend with whatever the titular love trap refers to. The survey confirmed that 62% of Americans would likely watch Love Trap to see a shrewd but cold-hearted Southern belle named Tammy. 23% of the nation hoped the show would be referred to as The Trap by its most loyal fans, and 15% of respondents said they simply needed something to watch. And in this week's Science News, a biologist completes a 5-minute study of the pathetic organism in his mirror. In other news, a man confidently hits send on the worst job application a company has ever seen.
This is the Onion News Network.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. I, again, almost gave out the number, but I caught myself before doing it. But hey, I still had to talk about something as we come back from break. So you can come down and hang out with us at RB46. We are recording here pretty much from noon to about 5 o'clock p.m. each day. I realized we should have some signs up saying, hey, we're recording at these times. Come by. We should have some chairs out and stuff. But, like, we've had a rough few years at Free Talk Live with with like 3 of the people involved getting indicted, and Ian going to trial and then federal prison.
As of right this second, you're the only person that knows how to do this.
Also true. So I've been pretty distracted with moving into a new apartment and simultaneously moving out of said apartment and into a new house. Also reuniting with my dogs, working my job, trying to just get a handle on things that need to be done with Free Talk Live again.
Okay, just getting out of prison.
Yeah. And I'm going to talk about it today at 4 o'clock because it's surprisingly more stressful than I expected it to be.
Did your speech writing go well?
Yeah, it went fine. I already knew all of the stuff that I needed to say. The problem was, and I, did the outline, I did note cards and all of that, and then I left all of that in my apartment. So, yeah, obviously. As well as the missing episode of Free Talk Cast. Yes, I know there should have been an episode last Friday. There will be an episode this Friday. Bonnie and I are going to record it sometime in the near future, and that will be live as usual. That episode ended up on my desktop, which is completely air-gapped right now, which means it has no network connection to it, right? So it's also not on because, there's no one there.
It is a desktop. It's not a laptop, so it's not here.
Right. And I intended to copy the audio to a flash drive so I could edit it here when I arrived last Thursday night and put it online. But hey, guess what I forgot to do? Which is sad because it's a fantastic episode with Richie Rich and myself. Richie Rich, of course, does the Sunday night shows. And all we really talked about was how to interact with police officers. And because most people don't really know how to do that. So
I always forget he has a long history of activism, but it was in Hawaii where he's from.
Yeah. And he did it all by himself for the most part in Hawaii. He didn't have the core group of, if you want to go cop blocking in New Hampshire.
Activism.
Yeah. There's plenty of people who will join you.
Mm-hmm.
But in Hawaii, not so much. But we're joined now by Christopher Gronsky of DestinationFreedom.org, talking to us about how people can help get out of their tax obligations or their alleged tax obligations to the federal government. Now, this whole thing is...
That would be state as well. If you don't have a federal income tax liability, you wouldn't have a state income tax liability either.
Well, okay, I have questions about that then because I thought with your system you kind of claim state citizenship, so how do you not have state tax liability?
Because state income tax is based in the federal.
Okay.
So they tax federal citizens as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's convenient. But what catches me about all of this is that I saw this happen to Ian, and if you don't want to pay your taxes, all you have to do is not file your W-2. Really, that's it. The chances of the IRS even noticing that, much less coming after you, are 1 in millions. It's almost certainly not going. If you're just some McDonald's worker and you decide you don't want to pay your taxes,
don't do it.
Yeah.
But see that's.
But
that's,
you're.
Let's see. Look,
Well,
there's
let me
people
finish.
That are paying in.
That's
paying
exactly
in.
what I was going to say.
Oh,
I mean, your employer is automatically taking out of your check anyway.
Well,
So, but the situation stands that you could, if you wanted to, just not pay your taxes and never get in trouble. The problem is, once you get on their radar, or you do this with a substantial amount of money, there's millions of people who have sold Bitcoin, and they didn't get indicted.
Mm-hmm.
It's once you reach a threshold of a certain amount of money and you get their attention, that's when they come after you. And I don't think that any of this stuff would protect anyone.
Well, that's not really what happens. That's how you see it, but that's not really. Those aren't the triggers. There's all kinds of different indicators. And yes, of course, if people don't file, it's much easier to not do anything. But the IRS doesn't just come after you willy-nilly. Okay, it's 3 years. If they haven't come after you and it's been 3 years since a year, they cannot come after you for past years. So
they did Ian
I
Freeman.
always thought it was 7.
No, if they deal with...
they literally found him guilty of 4 counts of tax evasion. So that's by definition more than 3 years.
No, if they can deal with a year indefinitely if they've dealt with it already. But 3 years is the amount of that. They can't go back further than that. And again,
I don't have the.
I'm just saying
I don't have it pulled in front of me, but
that's how it is for that. So I don't.
It did literally just happen to Ian, though. So.
Well, I'd have to look and see what years they were talking about specifically, and if they were asking ahead of time. No one of our clients, no one's going to take a tax stand while being employed. So all of our clients work for themselves and do their own businesses, or if they are working for someone, then they end that or contract with the company if it's worth them working for, but paying in, because people don't realize this is a jurisdictional thing. So paying taxes is one thing, but Social Security is a tax as well. And so sometimes people just stop paying taxes, or they make that distinction and they're still paying in Social Security. So that's not a jurisdictional change. We're talking about completely. And so that's a different area with respect to IRS.
I think the perfect group of people to not file is people who it's not your W-2, it's where you didn't pay them and you're going to get it taken away from you, like Young Americans for Liberty people. They door knock. I've gotten multiple of them to not file because they would just take money from them. They weren't like waiting for a tax return to get money back. And then also who aren't going to be like big political activists. Like if you don't think you're going to go do some big political activism and get a spotlight on you. I've gotten like multiple people to stop filing taxes in situations where they weren't waiting for a tax return.
Well, there's another thing of whether that someone not files in there and they're subject to that jurisdiction in some capacity. Not filing is not the same as whether you have a tax liability or not. Because if you talk about a church, a 501c3 church, they're not paying taxes, but they're still in a status that if the IRS wanted to determine if they were governing themselves according to their non-tax status, they could certainly still audit them. So they're still in that jurisdiction, even though they're not paying taxes per se. So we're not talking about tax avoidance. We're talking about whether you have the liability or not. So again, paying taxes isn't the standard by which we're going. We're going by whether you're in that jurisdiction or not. That's how we look at it.
On the subject of 501c3s, I have never heard an attorney recommend someone to establish 501c3 status. Every attorney that I talked to, especially during the Crypto 6 case, when they asked me whether or not my church was 501c3, I would answer no. They're like, oh, thank goodness, that's good. So I'm not sure there's any benefit. Plus, as Ian has pointed out repeatedly, requesting the government's permission to worship God is backwards.
I agree.
Right. You're supposed to be able to worship as you please, whether the government likes it or not. That's what the First Amendment actually entails.
So do we know whether Free State Project is a 501c3 of some sort?
It's not
it is.
It's like something else, right?
Oh, I thought it was a 501c3.
Well, the C3 is like religious. It's something else.
Right. So my question is, they're
It
they're not registered as a political activist group. I mean, a PAC, are they?
Not a PAC either, but there's something where they're registered with the government because people always bring it up. They're like, oh, if they do this, that actually goes against their
Well, that's
rules.
what I'm saying. They've been very political these days, having candidates actually come to these events.
Yeah,
and
but
I'm
they can't endorse
wondering
them.
if
That's what they say on Twitter.
I know they say that, except for are they getting all the Democrats here? Are they getting all the Republicans? They tend to. I mean, like
That's
when
what
I
we
was
wondered.
registering, they asked me to sign a petition to get the Libertarian Party, so they're advocating the Libertarian Party. So I'm thinking that's like crossing a line.
They do multiple things that actually put them in danger for this. Like there's some rules for their taking minutes and stuff like that. But then they'll go around it. They'll be like, hey, we didn't take minutes when we banned Alu because I just texted him and asked him not to be on, blah, blah, blah. But I don't really think they always go around it. I think they are breaking some rules. And really, we just don't need this ink. We don't need FSP Inc. at all. We don't need unelected bureaucrats of the Free State Project.
It didn't make sense to me years ago when we were here when it was starting, and I remember them going for the 501c3 or whatever the unit. And I said, Mike, it doesn't make sense. A freedom organization is going to file paperwork with. I mean, look, just do your thing. You don't have to create something. People get together and do their thing. I remember, the things that I've been part of. You just don't. There's no thing. And I remember getting a PO box at a post office. Say, "What's your thing?" I'm like, well, we drink a lot of beer. I wear the big hat, and I'm burnt sienna, so I can make all the big decisions because I'm this color crayon, and the other crayons are this and that. And do we have any statutes for color crayons? No. Okay, well then I'm sorry, that's what we're doing. But I mean, again, if you're going to term yourself the things that they want to tax, regulate, and control, then what hope do you have? I mean, why would you even go that way? Well, by the way, when the founding fathers had done the Declaration of Independence, what corporation did they form or put together? Look, they just did it. They just came together.
Well, they put together the United States government.
Not the Declaration of Independence. I'm not talking about the Constitution.
But I mean, generally, it was the same people who drafted and agreed to and signed on to the Constitution, I believe.
Not all of them. No,
not all of them.
There were anti-federalists who said we don't want this.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to read the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and see those arguments pro and con about what. I mean, we look at where we are. The Anti-Federalists were right.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I was down in Faneuil Hall, and which is a national park, and I said they had the Federalist papers. I said, well, where are the anti-federalist papers? They do not sell the anti-federalist papers. These are historical documents. It's like, really? Oh, yeah, because we're the federal government. We can't.
Well, you know, it's
like, that's crazy.
The politically correct thing to do on both sides now, ever since Lincoln, is to be an anti-federalist, which is crazy. Lincoln was an extreme Hamiltonian, and he made it to where it's like sacrilegious to be anything but an anti-federalist. But I just looked it up.
Federalist. He was a federalist.
A federalist. My bad.
I'm an anti-federalist.
Right,
Yeah,
me
same.
too. Jeffersonian.
I
So,
prefer smaller governments.
I looked it up
Decentralized.
and Free State Project is 501c3. I don't know why I thought that was only religious and there was something else, but I know they're not a PAC, and that's why they can't promote specific people running for candidates. The other day they posted on Twitter, they said there are many Free Staters running for office. We can't tell you who because we're not allowed to promote specific candidates, but we can tell you that there are a lot of them, something like that.
See, that's why you don't bend your knees to the government, right? As soon as you do, as soon as they got that paperwork, the people involved in the Free State Project gave up their rights, their right to free speech, their right to use their platform to promote candidates of their choosing. They neutered themselves.
See, exactly. Because look, if they just do your thing, people will keep their word, whatever the deal is. And so, and then, like you're saying, they have all the free speech protections because it's just them.
Yep.
Again, but you know what? It's the almighty dollar. We want we want the federal dollars, and so this is what we're willing to do. That's sad.
They could still have their board, though. They could still have everything they have
whatever
now.
you want.
Yeah.
Well, they wouldn't get big people donating to them. So I bet that's what it is.
Well, because they want tax write-offs.
Right.
That's part of it, and that's sad. And
They also
listen, we're
wouldn't-
talking about Free State Project, but this is every church.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we're actually moving towards unplugging churches, whole churches, not only eliminating their income tax liability, but also eliminating all of their credit card debt and all that. So we're dealing with all the debt discharge as well.
Wow,
as,
I didn't know you did debt discharging.
as well as the eliminating their income tax liability.
I love that because this is one of the primary reasons that the Reformed Satanic Church even exists. Now, the Church of Satan is it's anti-church for the most part, but they filed for 501c3 status in order to be tax exempt, and then they made a big show of being, quote, proud to pay their taxes, right? Because they for some reason they're really butthurt about Christian churches and other churches not having to pay taxes.
Wow.
Whereas I'm looking at this from the correct, and yes,
Like satanic.
it's the correct satanic perspective of you should not be giving your money to people who are going to use it to kill other people and to oppress other people and destroy their rights. You should be tax exempt across the board. You guys should be proudly tax exempt and urging other churches to do it. Don't proudly pay your taxes. Proudly not have to pay your taxes. I would say proudly just not pay your taxes, but
But see-
I'm on U.S. probation right now. It's probably not a great idea to say that.
But the thing about it is that all of these entities and the people who are doing these 501c3s, they all believe that they are located in the United States, District of Columbia. So if they realize that they weren't in these jurisdictions, they wouldn't have to fill out this paperwork. But again, they don't read tax code. They don't read the definitions in the tax code of what they're talking about. The income tax is for those that are in the District of Columbia, that would be resident aliens and federal citizens. So if you're neither of those, you don't even have to do these exemptions. I mean, it's like, did you get the exemption in Italy or in Germany?
No, of course not.
No, because you're not German. You're not in Germany. So why would we want to go and get the tax status from the District of Columbia? Why do they want to do that? They all want to get in the District of Columbia so that they can be regulated. It doesn't make sense.
The Free State Project should have to take away the word free, because that should be for free churches like the Shire Free Church. That's what that means. It's not like just a name.
Right. And the Shire Free Church never sought 501c3 status.
Yeah, never.
Right.
And but it's an actual church, and you can actually do community service. Like if you're in Keene or Cheshire County, presumably all of New Hampshire, I'm not entirely sure though, but if you're in Cheshire County and you're sentenced to community service, you can in fact do that community service with the Shire Free Church. Like they're authorized to give you assignments and to do all of that stuff like it's an actual real church.
And we consider outreach like cop blocking to be tax. We've written people off for that.
Yeah, it's community service. You are serving
That's
the
the word.
community.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's the correct thing I would expect from a church. Instead, you end up with a lot of churches, especially throughout the United States and in the South particularly, that are just all pro-police, pro-Trump, pro-oppression, pro-Blue Lives Matter. Is like, did you guys not read this book your dude wrote?
It's so un-American. So many people that are like, yeah, pro-America. They're the least American that I can't describe them as any less American. It's like being for the redcoats in 2024 when you're pro-cops.
Well, see, a lot of people think America's a country, too. I mean, people don't think Europe's a country. America's a confederation of states.
Right.
America's a union. And, you know, someone was on my Facebook page, and they had this, tractor trailer full of flags for Flag Day, and they had flags all over. The flag it was definitely flag worship, you know, and so they're making like it's proud. I'm like, and so I wrote in this like, do you think the Europeans are as excited about their union as we are excited about ours?
I've never even seen the
It's
European Union flag.
I'm waiting for them to, the European Union would probably get together and go like, those Americans got something going with their union. We should have the European Union Day and put the European Union in front of all of our stadiums and all that stuff and sing, "Oh, Union of Europe" and all that, just to have their song and all that stuff.
It's crazy how many
crazy.
It's crazy how many Americans also don't understand that, or how many people who are in North America, rather.
Yeah.
Because one of my last times on the Quora website, before they went monetizing, it just became this nightmarish hellscape of liberals who all they do is monetize their content. Pointlessly, that defeats the entire purpose of Quora. But anyway, there was this Californian. I had answered a question about secession and how I was obviously pro-secession. And she pointed out that these states aren't republics. They don't have any government in order to do this. I was like, Republic of California is literally on your state flag, girl.
Wow.
Your state is literally a republic right now. Right. That wouldn't change with secession. Right now, you're living in the Republic of California.
This is all because of Lincoln. Like, ever since Lincoln, he started all the indoctrination to make people forget what we're exactly talking about, that there is such thing as people who were like, hey, with this new government system we want to do, I don't want there to be a federal government. And then there's other people saying, well, we think there should be a strong federal government, and that it's not just one or the other. It's not just like from the beginning. It was always supposed to be a union.
Again, if like Malcolm X says, why would you let your enemy educate your children? I mean, Americans are pretty ignorant of what they have. And that's the other thing too, is, so no one has the right to associate. That's a privilege.
It is.
If you're going to be with somebody, they got to agree to be with you. We get restraining orders on people who want to be with people that don't want to be with them. And so the idea is that you have to get permission to come into the union, because you have to get the agreement of the other states if they want you to be with them. But anyone can leave, like Britain left the European Union. Anyone can leave the union by choice. And of course, it would be a collective vote in that regard.
Sure.
But it doesn't have to be bloodshed for leaving the union. The opening of the Declaration of Independence says that when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to the other, and assume that among the powers of the powers, I forget the word there, but to be free, and independent. And so that's your right, is to disassociate. And that's what many people don't feel. You can disassociate with anyone you want. That's why exile is a much better way to punish, is to say, hey, I don't want to be with you. Not that you do anything with somebody, but they can say, we don't want to be with you, because
instead of putting them in a cage,
well,
like barbarians.
Exactly.
Well, the USSR loved exile. And like me personally, I would have taken exile over imprisonment because then I could have taken my cats.
Well,
right?
exactly. But that's a more peaceful thing. But again, people don't realize what power they have and what they do. So we still promote that America is a country instead of it's a union. It's a confederation of states. These are states, and I want to make America states again.
Very well put. I agree entirely. I would love to see Americans understand that these states that we have, this national government that we have, it's supposed to be about on par with the one in the European Union. And I would like to warn the people in the European Union, you see this behemoth that we have now called the United States government? That's you in 200 years. that European Union government will continue to grow and federalize and become more centralized and stronger until everyone forgets that Italy and Germany used to be independent states.
That's a great word.
Crazy.
That's
what
a
I
great
was
word.
about to say.
So if you watch the YouTube film called Brexit, and they go into great detail the corruption in the European Union, like how many regulations are on a pillow and all that stuff. And when I saw that, it was like, well, our government is the European Union on steroids. And the difference is we have a freaking military in which we murder people around the planet. That's the difference. Because look, how happier would we be if Europe defended itself and actually, but they know they don't want to empower their European Union with the force that they have in their states. They recognize it because they've been there before. Americans, not so bright, because there's cash associated with that. The military-industrial complex.
And indoctrination with all the movies and everything, like, oh, your country, you need to die for your country and be really proud of your country. Really, I think of America as, well, obviously a collection of states, but also just like the culture of the people and the people. And I used to, when I first became a libertarian, I got kind of like upset, and I was like, well, now I hate America. I'm not American. And now I'm back to the beginning where I love being American and I care a lot about it. I'm like learning a lot about history recently, but I am not a unionist.
And I would say you people out there who are displaying your American flag going, what about this flag for Pride Month? Man, stop being a snowflake. But thank you so much for joining us today, Christopher. You can find out more at destinationfreedom.org. Again, that's destinationfreedom.org. There's more coming up here from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It is Free Talk Live.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. Tired of the ever-inflating US dollar? You can live your life on Dash instead with some handy websites. BitRefill.com has been accepting Dash for years and has a ton of big-name retailers and brands including grocers, gas stations, phone refills, Amazon, and even prepaid MasterCards. Plus, many of their gift cards are available at a discount. But what about paying your bills? Spritz.finance can do that, and they can send dollars to your bank account in case you still need those for some reason. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at Dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. Dash.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Ben Chihaya. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un have signed a pact pledging the countries help one another in the face of perceived aggression. The agreement was made official on Wednesday during President Putin's first visit to the DPRK in almost a quarter of a century. He was welcomed with a lavish ceremony and spent hours speaking one-to-one with Mr. Kim. The deal marks the strongest connection between the two states since the end of the Cold War. It covers security, trade, investment, cultural and humanitarian ties. Those relations have tightened in recent years, especially since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which the US and South Korea claim is being fueled by North Korean ammunition in exchange for food and military aid, accusations Moscow and Pyongyang deny. Both neighbouring nations face Western sanctions. The United Nations Human Rights Office say Israeli airstrikes in Gaza may have systematically violated the laws of war, which require that civilians be protected. Israel's rejected the UN findings as factually and legally flawed. This as the Biden administration urges de-escalation between Israel and the Lebanon-based Iranian proxy militia group Hezbollah amid deadly skirmishes in past months. The Israeli military's drawn up a battle plan, while Hezbollah published drone footage captured over Israeli military sites. Sarah Coates is on the ground for us in Israel.
This video purportedly showing very sensitive naval bases and things like Iron Dome batteries published yesterday by Hezbollah will certainly be of great concern to the Israeli military, given that no air defenses were activated, although it remains unclear when this video was shot. They're sophisticated, heavily armed and battle-hardened from fighting in Syria's civil war. Israeli officials have repeatedly threatened to turn Beirut into another Gaza amid urgent calls from the international community for immediate de-escalation in a bid to avert a wider regional conflict.
Hezbollah insists it will not halt its attacks into northern Israel unless there's a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Filipino soldiers say they had to use their bare hands to fight off armed Chinese Coast Guard personnel in a clash earlier this week in the disputed South China Sea, following a string of dangerous maritime encounters. China alleges its actions were restrained, but Pentagon spokesperson Pat Ryder has expressed concern.
This kind of behavior is provocative, it's reckless, it could lead to something bigger and more violent.
An American soldier's been jailed for almost 4 years by a Russian court on charges of theft. He'll serve a sentence in a penal colony. Nick Harper reports.
34-year-old Staff Sergeant Gordon Black was arrested last month following reports that he'd threatened to kill his girlfriend and stolen just over $100 from her. Black's travel to Russia was not authorized by the US Department of Defense.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live here on site at the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and the heat has finally broken, like fully.
Suddenly.
Yeah, and it's quite refreshing. It's very windy. It's a bit rainy and a bit thundery, and you will probably hear some of that here. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. We're on site. We're doing a show, so there's going to be background noise. So
meteorology is just wrong, because like earlier in this show, you'll hear me saying to Arya, like, "Oh, it's not supposed to thunder today anymore."
Yep.
I see it and I hear it.
And it wasn't supposed to rain until tomorrow. Today was supposed to be sunny and 95-ish degrees, but right now it feels amazing, and that wind is extraordinarily welcome. So
it's almost like cold. I went and got my blanket.
Yeah, the rain is cold. I expected the rain to be a little bit more refreshing than it is. Instead, you step out there and you get rained on, and it's just cold. I did pull down some of the sides here so that we're not getting rained on, but it seems that now the wind has changed directions. So, of course, I'm getting rained on again. But that's what happens here at the Porcupine Freedom Festival. As long as the electronic equipment is safe, I will be okay. I have to change clothes for my speech anyway, because I'm not giving a speech wearing this. But it was 94 degrees earlier.
She's naked for the listeners.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Like yesterday, I took my top off here, and today felt even hotter than yesterday. So, last night we tried to have a strip poker game here at the Free Talk Live site. Unfortunately, I was the only one willing to actually play, from what we could tell.
Well, I was willing to play, but not strip.
Yeah, fair enough. There seemed to be considerable amounts of interest in it. But to be fair, like, and no disrespect meant to anyone here, but I do not want to see the vast majority of you without clothes on.
Yeah, I won't say who, but one guy, older guy, was like, "No way! Who wants to see a 65-year-old man naked?" And
yeah,
he was just like, somebody else was saying to him, like, "Don't be self-conscious." He's like, "It's not that I'm self-conscious. It's just that nobody wants to see that. I'm not going to force it on him." I was like, he's probably right.
I mean,
he's right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
There were a few such dudes running around without shirts on yesterday, and like, I understand it's hot, but like, put some care into your body, I guess, right? Like, do some sit-ups.
Violation of the nap. To walk around with boobs as a man.
Yeah, I don't. It feels somewhat like a nap violation, certainly, and it's certainly something I would rather not see. But, you know, not everyone is beautiful, and the human body simply is the human body.
I'm joking about being a nap violation, but stinking is a nap violation.
What is it?
Stinking.
Oh, stinking. Yeah, I
going
in
into someone's house stinking.
Well, you're sort of forcing them to
be uncomfortable
and engage with air molecules and scent molecules that are coming off of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I could see there's no consent in that relationship.
Maybe it's a nap violation as soon as somebody tells you to stop stinking, you know?
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
Until then, for all you know, they like it.
Libertarianism does have sort of a overlap with hippies in that regard. There are a shocking number of libertarians who don't seem to shower regularly and who don't wear deodorant.
This is the thing. There's like this whole school of thought that not wearing deodorant actually like is better for you and you don't stink as much, but that's fine and dandy for the people who eat right. But the people who don't eat right, they stink.
That makes sense. And a lot of the libertarians don't eat right. They're engaging in the keto diet, so all they eat is meat and potatoes or whatever.
I
And
think keto's bad too.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather when I first went vegetarian a few years ago, everyone I knew just about said, "Don't do that. Just do a carnivore diet instead." I'm like, no, that's the opposite direction. I want to be healthy with
carnivore's not
vitamins
good.
and minerals, not protein. I mean, protein's good too, and you got to have protein. But that's what you get here, and I'm shocked by the number of libertarians who don't. What is their issue with shoes?
Oh, well, they're trying to ground. The thing is, though, like, walking around on pavement isn't the same as grounding, and your feet will be disgusting. Just whenever you're in a grassy spot, slip off your shoes and sit there and ground for a while. It really doesn't take all day.
Yeah, and then your feet don't look like a hobbit's.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I think of when I see some of these people's feet, because they're almost black at this point. I'm like, you look like Frodo.
Because walking on asphalt isn't grounding, and, well, maybe it is literally, like, negative ions, whatever. But it's not, like, natural and good for you. You're getting car toxins all over your feet.
Also a valid point. So that's the reason they do it, because they consider themselves to be grounding?
And that's what most people say. Like, apparently around the fire last year, I wasn't here for this, there's a guy that we all know, and he's nice and funny and never aggressive or anything. But he was, like, drunk, and he was telling people, like, everyone, take off your shoes. Why are you all wearing shoes? And he wouldn't drop it because he was just, like, drunk, and he's like, it's good for you. Take off your shoes. And everybody's like, dude, I don't want to. It's just so funny.
Personally, I prefer flip-flops. Boy, it is really raining here. Sorry if that's coming in over the background. But
I love flip-flops, too, because it's like you can easily take them off when you're in a grassy, nice spot, and I'm doing it right now while I'm sitting here. But you can put it back on when you need to walk on something rocky or...
I just hate shoes, honestly, and I hate socks. I hate having my feet covered, and flip-flops strike a good balance with that.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, I was able to get flip-flops while in prison. I inherited 2 different pairs. The first one ended up breaking, but I inherited a second pair that it actually fit better anyway.
Were they like the shower flip-flops only?
No, they got... No. There are clogs that they sell that they call shower shoes, and that's what most people use, but... These were legacy, and they had come from other facilities. One, like, if you transfer there, you get to take your property, and if it's authorized at a county jail, they're generally going to authorize you to have it at the BOP. Not always, but usually.
They sent me Ian's, well, no, they sent me in the mail Ian's tennis shoes from county jail.
Did they send you his tablet?
No.
Weird. Well, who knows why these people do what they do.
Yeah.
But that's how a lot of these flip-flops got into federal prison. And to be honest, I'm happy about it because I'd so much rather wear flip-flops. Despite being here in New Hampshire, I would wear flip-flops during the winter. I do it when there's snow on the ground.
Whoa.
Just because I prefer flip-flops.
I'm not that anti-shoe, and actually in the winter I get in this like seasonal time period where I like socks. But right now, the idea of wearing a sock is like disgusting.
Yeah, and it's very hot today. Yeah. Even now it's still a little bit muggy, but I mean it's comfortable, it's much better. But there's someone sorely missing. There's multiple there's 2 sorely missing from the Porcupine Freedom Festival. Obviously Ian Freeman, but there's another person who you would think, after being targeted to the extent they have been by the government, they might be a little bit more friendly towards liberty, especially considering
Trump. No, I'm just kidding.
They began their career relatively friendly toward liberty. Alex Jones is the person I'm referring to, and he once did a lot of really good work. The Obama Deception is a fantastic documentary.
Never seen it.
And there are a few others whose names I have forgotten that I would definitely recommend. His documentaries from the 2010 to 2015 era probably were on point. They weren't filled with Trump nonsense, but then Trump came around, and Alex Jones became a statist. And that has done him no benefits whatsoever. It's the same sort of thing that happened to Chris Cantwell, except he went a little bit further and it wasn't really Donald Trump's fault. But falling in love with the state and authoritarianism did not do any of these individuals any good. Alex Jones still got prosecuted. He seems to be losing everything. I haven't heard anything about what's going on with him, but you have a story about him. So fill us in. What is happening in this maniac's world? By the way, Alex Jones, I would absolutely have you on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, we were both GCN.
Yep. I don't think we'd let you host the show, but you could absolutely be on with us.
So this is from AP. And I think he is basically going to lose everything. It says Alex Jones's personal assets to be sold to pay $1.5 billion Sandy Hook debt. Company bankruptcy is dismissed. So, a federal judge on Friday ordered the liquidation of conspiracy theorist Alex Jones' personal assets. The federal government is a conspiracy theorist. You can actually call the federal government, or at least the prosecution and Ian in your case, conspiracy theorists. They had a theory that you guys conspired together. That's all that means.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
stupid. It's such a stupid term the way it's used nowadays.
Well, conspiracy theorist is mostly used to bash alternative ideas.
Yeah.
Like you say something that people don't want to hear, and they go, "Oh, that's just a conspiracy theory," and that's their way of discarding it. Criminal has the same sort of implications. Once you call someone a criminal, you stop seeing them as a human being. And the same sort of thing happens with Nazi. We see that a lot, and conspiracy theorist.
Everything they believe must be bad because they're a felon or whatever.
Yeah, it's tragic.
So it says the judge ordered the liquidation of conspiracy theorist Alex Jones's personal assets, but he also dismissed Alex's company's separate bankruptcy case, leaving the immediate future of his InfoWars media platform uncertain, as he owes $1.5 billion for his false claims that the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a hoax. And it's just like you just write false claims. It's like maybe that is the case, but like you're the media. You weren't there. You're supposed to. It's just so stupid. We don't have like a media that thinks for itself. It's just like it's peddling the idea that you're supposed to think. It's forcing you.
I think Alex Jones was probably wrong about Sandy Hook, but I don't know. And I don't understand how it can become, you said something that was wrong, therefore you have to pay $1.5 billion.
Also, he really didn't say it. He didn't say the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. He had people on and interviewed them. He was asking questions. That's the craziest part about all of this. You're not allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, but the way they ask questions, and South Park did a really good take on this with Eric Cartman basically being Alex Jones. And I received a couple of Alex Jones books when I was in prison. And I learned very quickly that the best way to enjoy these books was, in fact, to read them in Eric Cartman's voice. And they would say some bizarre things. Like, there's one of these guys, I think he's a senator or something, who writes weird pornographic books about men ending up, or women ending up being the sex slaves of extraterrestrials.
Ew.
Right, yeah, it's a weird thing to write about, but hey, whatever.
Well, Kurt Vonnegut did it.
Yeah, people have their kinks, man. I'm not going to knock it. It's not for me, but whatever makes you happy. And Alex Jones took this and says, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy to turn all of human beings into sex slaves for extraterrestrials, but it certainly raises the question, doesn't it? I'm just asking the question. Why is he interested in betraying his own species to extraterrestrials? And that's what he means when he says he's just asking the question. It's an extremely loaded question.
Then Mark Edge should be in jail. That's how he says things.
It is, yeah. I'm not a fan of it, right? Like, if you're going to ask a question genuinely, then just ask the question. But the way that Alex Jones does it, it's more of an accusation. And then he's like, are you guilty of this very weird thing that I've accused you of being guilty of? I'm just asking the question. And it makes the person look and sound guilty.
It's still not the same thing as like false claims.
True. And even if he did make false claims, as long as he believed they were true, I don't see an issue with that.
Exactly. I also believe the same thing. I believe that you should be able to make false claims and not believe it. You should be able to make false claims and know you're lying and not get thrown in jail for speech. It's not. Except
you could damage someone's reputation wrongly by doing so. So I could sort of understand that from a libel standpoint.
But I'm not talking about a person. I'm talking about like, yeah, this wasn't a real situation. This was faked. It's not like calling some person out. The government's not a person.
That's true.
If he's saying it was the government, I don't even know if he was saying it was the government.
I think it was the victims' families that ended up suing him, and they made the argument that he was basically saying that
their feelings.
Well, yeah, that the children who died were lying and engaging in this hoax, because they're like, look, our children are really dead, and this guy's saying it didn't happen, so he's effectively saying our children are liars.
I don't know if that was the legal argument, though, because I heard that it was that, and this has been a while since I looked into this specific part, but I think that it was, their argument was, well, it caused us emotional damage, and these are our emotional damages. Wasn't like a libel thing.
But you should be allowed to be wrong. And this criminalization of being wrong, I think, is going to bite Americans in the rear at some point. It's already looked down upon to be wrong. This is why people don't admit when they are wrong, because we've equated intelligence with correctness. And we assume that if you're wrong about something, you must therefore be unintelligent. Think about anything someone has said to you that you think otherwise. You don't tell them they're wrong. You tell them you're stupid. And that's the incorrect way to go about this. And further making it impossible for people to admit when they're wrong by throwing $1.5 billion lawsuits at them is not the way to go. We should allow people to be wrong, and that's just all there is to it.
It says Judge Christopher Lopez approved converting Jones's proposed personal bankruptcy reorganization to a liquidation, but Lopez threw out the case of his company, Austin, Texas-based Free Speech Systems, after failed attempts by Jones to reach an agreement with Sandy Hook families on his proposals to reorganize and keep operating the company while paying them millions of dollars.
Yeah, let's be honest here as well, that this was about sinking Alex Jones and putting him out of business. $1.5 billion? Come on,
Even if
guys.
your feelings were hurt, like worse than anyone else's feelings have ever been hurt in the history of all time, why does Alex Jones owe you millions of dollars for it?
Yeah, he absolutely shouldn't.
There are people that hurt my feelings about my husband being in jail all the time.
Even $100,000 per quote-unquote victim would have been excessive. But this has to be tens of millions of dollars per victim in order to reach $1.5 billion. Alex Jones doesn't have that kind of money.
Who does? Well,
Right.
maybe like the Tesla guy?
Yeah, Elon Musk could pay it, probably.
It says it wasn't immediately clear what will happen in the coming weeks to Free Speech Systems, InfoWars' parent company, which Jones built into a multi-million-dollar moneymaker over the past 25 years by selling dietary supplements and other products. But both Jones and lawyers...
That reminds me of, like, back when I was doing the Call to
Man
Freedom.
Max or something.
We had a caller call in doing an Alex Jones impression, and he did a really good impression. He broke character once, but it was otherwise a really good impression. And he suggested that I go to Infowars.com and buy some Super Shemale Vitality. Because that's the kind of
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's the kind of nonsense that Alex Jones has been selling for years, and apparently people are buying it.
I was calling it Man Max, but I think it is Super Male Vitality.
Oh, that's a real thing they have, Super Male Vitality?
Something close to that, if not. But yeah, that's hilarious. It's like,
and people buy it for some reason.
because Alex Jones is like built like a big giant linebacker, and he's like, my kids aren't going to go hungry. I will eat my neighbors. You think I like sizing up my neighbors and thinking about what cuts I'm going to make? My kids aren't going hungry. I will eat your leftist ass.
Did he really say that?
Yeah.
That sounds like him in a video. Oh, good Lord. He's an entertainer, man.
Yeah.
And like that's what people lose sight of when they start believing in him too much. He seems to have sort of become the character that he had created, which is fine because he did a lot of good work in the process with the Obama deception and others that I can't remember the names of, but he's gone off the deep end at this point, but he's still an entertainer, and that is entertaining. I think he got banned from Facebook a number of years ago, and I was against that. Someone pointed out, if you've ever seen the show Space Ghost Coast to Coast,
Yeah.
they needed to take Alex Jones clips and allow him on Facebook as parts of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Because some of the ones I saw would just have him saying just completely unhinged things. Like how if he thought it would prevent World War III, he would suck a golf ball through a garden hose and other just bizarre stuff that you wouldn't expect someone to say off the cuff like that. And meanwhile, the little bird guy's just over there just blinking and shocked, doesn't know what to say. And it was very entertaining. That's the way Alex Jones should have been allowed on there. Or as a South Park character. Any of those things would have been fitting for
Isn't
Alex
he a praying
Jones.
mantis, not a bird? Or was the praying mantis
Oh,
some
he
other
is.
guy?
He is a praying mantis. You are correct. I've only seen bits and pieces of it. It was never one of the shows that I watched a lot, even as I did watch a lot.
I think
of
his name is Zorak.
Yeah.
So funny.
I wouldn't have any idea what his name was.
It says both Jones and lawyers for the Sandy Hook families said they expect InfoWars to cease operating at some point because of the huge debt. That's just terrible. This man's whole entire business is being shut down. That hurts way more families than Alex Jones' words hurt the feelings of the families of the Sandy Hook people.
Alex Jones certainly does have a lot of employees.
Right.
And those people are going to be hurt by this, not to mention the millions of people who listen to Alex Jones. Now, it's true that we are beating Alex Jones on national radio. However, he's killing us online. Probably not so much anymore, given that his studio is effectively government property now. But he has a lot of listeners. A lot of people pay attention to Alex Jones. This hurts their First Amendment rights to engage with the press that they want to listen to.
And run a business?
Yeah.
It's so hard right now to even find clips of Alex Jones. Like, if you want to go find I'll Eat Your Leftist Ass, you're not going to find it easily on YouTube.
Which isn't surprising. I'm sure it's on Odyssey, though, and Library.
Yeah.
Library, of course, is a decentralized platform that allows people to share forms of content with one another. A lot of it is video content, but they do have songs and audiobooks. You can get the PDFs to 3D print some guns on there as well. There's a lot of good stuff on there beyond music, beyond videos, but it is primarily, it seems to be a video platform. But I absolutely love Library. I've been supporting it, I believe, since 2016. And I love Odyssey, not quite as much because it's a little more decentralized. But of course, Library was taken to task by the SEC a few years ago. And something very similar happened with them.
It was. Jeremy Kauffman's business was torn apart and destroyed just because of a vendetta of a government employee as well.
Disgorged was the word that they used to describe what they were, which sounds vicious and horrifying.
Like a bird killing a live mammal or something.
Yeah.
They're the guts.
It sounds like something I would not want to witness.
I had never heard that word before, disgorgement. I was like, that's what they call it. They're like, okay, now we're going to engage in some disgorgement.
Now, I believe Library still exists and is still functioning and is still going to continue on into the future. I haven't actually checked since I've been outside of prison.
I use Odyssey every day because I liked putting my videos in the background while I do other things on other apps, and I like that I can get all these people who can't get censored on YouTube. I use it every day.
Odyssey is fantastic. It's just it's not quite as decentralized, and that's the only issue I have with it. So there is a little more control over what you can and can't put on their platform. That said, it's a really loose sort of thing. And the reason Odyssey still exists is that Library wisely separated the two companies a few years ago. So the platform Odyssey didn't actually have anything to do with Library credits. Yeah.
Right? It's not a website?
I think it's a Library?
No, sorry, Odyssey.
Odyssey is also a website, odyssey.com. That's ODYSEE.com, I believe.
That's important to say.
Yeah, it's spelled weirdly, but, you can find it if you look for it.
At this point, like, whenever I go to spell Odyssey as in a trip or something, I'm spelling it wrong, like the app.
They do a lot of really good work over there. And, of course, when we did the She Talk Live episode Topless, it was broadcast only to our Odyssey platform, where I expected some amount of issues, and there kind of were.
Just the thumbnail.
Yeah, and in that they were like, hey, guys, you can't have this nudity as part of your thumbnail.
Well, so I think they asked, to be fair.
They did also ask, yeah. But as far as the content itself, they did not object to it. They had no issue with it, and we're allowed to do it anytime we want, which is a lot more than you could say about YouTube, who kicked us off a few weeks ago without any warning or notice whatsoever.
Permanently?
No, for like a week.
Okay.
I just happened to notice that we weren't streaming onto YouTube because
somebody asked me about it yesterday and I didn't know.
We should be back on YouTube, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't checked lately. But we had a 7-day strike, and I couldn't even find what video we received this strike over. All it said was, you have received a strike for violating community guidelines. It will go away in 7 days or whatever, because we're back down to our first strike, for whatever that is worth. But ultimately, we're being censored, and this really escalated during COVID-19 when we questioned the official narrative. And apparently, we did that rightly, because now everyone has sort of accepted. A lot of these people who I know were freaking out about COVID-19 and who got the vaccines, like 3 or 4 doses of it, the boosters and all of that crap, they're willingly admitting, yeah, it seems like it was a big nothing burger. We freaked out over nothing. Well, how about an apologize to the people whose rights you demolished in your fear?
Lives were like just stopped in their tracks. Like, I didn't get to go to college in person. I was just doing this online thing, and I was like, wait, I could just watch YouTube videos and quit.
Yep. People died alone in hospital rooms because of other people's fear of COVID-19.
Having to give birth alone?
Wearing masks while giving birth? Absolutely horrific behavior from one human being to another, and something that we're going to have to reckon with at some point. That's a large amount of darkness still within the human soul that just happened just a few years ago, and we're pretending like it didn't. But they did tell you, no, you can't go to work. No, you can't hang out with your friends. You can't be there when your grandmother dies. They told people that, and they forced people to endure it. They sent old people to nursing homes to allow them to die. It was absolutely horrific. A new level of barbarism.
People will come to a reckoning of the consequences of this, but unfortunately they won't know. There will be the lower IQ generation of kids who had to grow up wearing masks, but people don't understand what cause and effect is anymore. I'd say it all the time. They're not going to be like, why is this happening to our kids?
I was just saying 30 seconds. I didn't mean you had to stop immediately. Sorry. But the music bed is starting. And we're not hearing it right now because I'm waiting on a speaker to arrive, which should actually be here right about now. But I have to go do a speech at the pavilion. Come down and see it. Well, never mind. It's already happened by the time you're listening to this. But we're still here tomorrow. So come hang out with us at RB46. It is Free Talk Live.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the